Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto Rinnegan fanfiction council bashing part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Kabuto-san, the short, spiky blonde-haired figure of Uzumaki Naruto, gasped in confusion. What are you doing here? You know who he is? The tall, bulky figure of Jiraiya asked him with a sideward glance. Yeah, Naruto replied with a vigorous nod of his head, causing his hair to shake all over the place, making it messier than it had been previously. He was at the Chunin exams. Before Jiraiya could reply to Naruto, he was barged out of the way as Tsunade, the woman that they had spent the best part of 4 days searching for, went rampaging forward toward the gray-haired young man who stood just meters in front of them, her fist cocked back, a look of pure rage on her face as she closed the distance between them. As quickly as Tsunade's attack had been launched, it came to an end. Naruto's eyes had been barely able to keep up with what was happening. All he knew was that Tsunade had now stopped, her fist mere inches away from Kabuto's face. Blood splattered across the ground as it cascaded around Kabuto's kunai, which lay embedded in Tsunade's forehead. Blood! Tsunade shrieked. It was the most terrible shriek that Naruto had ever heard. It was a shriek of pure terror that echoed across the desert-like wasteland they stood in. My body finally started to move, Kabuto told Tsunade victoriously, a smug expression on his face as he slowly pushed his glasses back up onto the perch of his nose. Bet you hadn't expected that, huh, Lady Tsunade? Naruto couldn't tell what was up with Tsunade, but it was like her body had just shut down. Sure, the cut that Kabuto had nailed her with would have hurt, but it shouldn't have caused her to become unresponsive. Taking advantage of her state, Kabuto unleashed a vicious kick to Tsunade's chest, sending her sprawling backwards. Tsunade-sama! Shizen screamed as she dove to catch her injured master. Everything was happening so fast, he didn't understand what was happening. Why was Kabuto attacking the future Hokage? Why was he even here? What the hell is going? Naruto shouted as Shizen landed on the ground with a thump beside him, Tsunade unresponsive body landing on top of her. Your stupidity continues to astound me, Kabuto told his fellow genin, casually whipping Tsunade's blood from his kunai. It's the reason you can never hope to compare to Sasuke-kun. Anger welled up inside Naruto. Who was Kabuto to tell him he couldn't compare to Sasuke? He had managed to get through in the Chunin exams. Kabuto hadn't even managed to make it into preliminaries. Sasuke hadn't managed to even beat his opponent in the third part of the Chunin exam. In fact, he had defeated him instead. Look at his headband, kid, Jiraiya said to Naruto, snapping him out of his thoughts and making his eyes snap up to Kabuto's Hittite. There, where Naruto expected to see the little leaf symbol that represented all Konoha shinobi, was the symbol he had seen a few times during the Chunin exams, the symbol of the sound. He's Orochimaru's subordinate. A smile lit up upon Kabuto's face, a look of pride as he proudly proclaimed, "That's right, I'm a spy for Otogekyo no Sato." What? Naruto stuttered. Was it true? Could Kabuto, the man who had helped his team through the forest of death, really be working with Orochimaru? Had he helped him brand Sasuke with that weird seal? Had he helped him kill the Sandaime? You know what I have discovered, Naruto-kun? Kabuto asked Naruto. His voice still the same friendly tone that had drew Konohagakure no Sato's rookie 9 to him whilst they were waiting for Chunin exams to start. I concluded that you, unlike Sasuke-kun, have no talent as a shinobi. It hit him hard. He'd been told many times that he would never make it as a shinobi, but he never let it get to him. He'd ignored everything that was said, ignored the taunts of being the dead last. He had graduated despite everything and was now a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. His breathing had gotten short and shallow as he struggled to control his anger. Every fiber of his body was telling him to show Kabuto just what type of shinobi he was. A gentle hand gripped his shoulder lightly. Naruto's head snapped up to see the friendly face of Jiraiya smiling down at him. His weird tattoos crinkled as he smiled, and his normally lecherous face transformed into a pleasant smile. Don't listen to him, kid, the Toad Sannin told Naruto, giving his shoulder another squeeze. He isn't a proper shinobi. He is in no position to cast judgment on your skills. Even if you do make a scary face, it doesn't change the fact that out here, Kabuto informed Naruto, you are nothing more than an out-of-place genin. You rely on that monster inside you, but next to the Sannin you are nothing. And I won't hesitate to kill you if you try something stupid. It was the final straw for Naruto. He gave a roar of anger and started to charge, only to be yanked back by the strong arm of Jiraiya. See, even a fool like Jiraiya knows you would die if you tried something. Kabuto smirked. Actually, the Toad Sannin corrected, I just don't want Naruto to risk getting his clothes dirty. I hear traitor's blood is hard to get out. You haven't changed, Jiraiya, Orochimaru hissed from behind Kabuto, his amber eyes shining with malice as he stared at his former teammate. You are still as weak as always. One man's weakness is another man's strength. Jiraiya countered a slight nod of his head, his eyes staring at Orochimaru, who bared his teeth and growled, "Shizen, you handle the kid in the glasses. I'll take Orochimaru." "But Jiraiya-sama," Shizen whispered barely loud enough for Naruto to hear. "What about?" She trailed off. "Tsunade isn't in a fit state to fix her mistake. I'll just have to deal with it." Jiraiya returned with an equally low whisper before turning to Tsunade, who had sank to her knees and was shaking, her blood no longer on her body. "Probably thanks to Shizen. Heal yourself with your jutsu, Tsunadeheim." "What about me?" Naruto argued. If this pervert thought for 1 second he was just going to sit back and watch as they fought, he had another thing coming. "You stay here and guard Tsunade," the white-haired toad Sannin replied. "What?" Naruto yelled. "Look," Jiraiya explained to Naruto, "they're dangerous ninja. Orochimaru killed the Sandaime, and Kabuto could give Kakashi a run for his money. They're just too powerful for you." "But my Kagebushin!" Naruto protested, his hands already performing the seals. "It's useless," Jiraiya told Naruto, slapping the boy's hands, breaking the chain of seals. "With those two as your opponents, you're just wasting chakra. Just make sure nothing happens to Tsunade." In a blur, Jiraiya demonstrated speed which no man his age should have been capable of. He brought his thumb up to his mouth, bit it so a small trickle of blood rolled down the edge of the digit before slamming his open palm down onto the dusty ground and shouting, "Kuchios no Jutsu." His actions had been mirrored almost perfectly by Orochimaru and Kabuto, the combined effort just a fraction of a second behind that of Jiraiya's. 2 loud bangs echoed across the wasteland, 2 pillars of smoke appearing and quickly disappearing and revealing a giant snake in the place of Kabuto and Orochimaru, who had taken residence on the beast's head, and beside Jiraiya a small toad barely ankle-high. The intense look on Jiraiya's lip being replaced with a look of utter disappointment as the little toad looked around curiously. "Your stupidity is still as apparent as ever," Orochimaru mocked. "I guess this means I attack first. I have always known of your lack of talent, but even this is poor by your standards. Perhaps Tsunade has hindered you? Perhaps she was prepared to sacrifice the fool for her loved ones after all." "Damn it," Jiraiya grumbled. "Pathetic," Orochimaru sneered. "Hey!" Naruto yelled, his arm outstretched and pointing to the pale figure of Orochimaru. "Don't talk to Ero-sennin like that." Naruto mimicked Jiraiya's earlier actions, biting his own thumb till it bled before slamming his hand down into the ground. He could feel every set of eyes on him as he attempted to summon Gamabunta and teach this bastard a lesson. "Kuchios no Jutsu." The same bang and smoke appeared as with Jiraiya, and once the smoke cleared, the same look of disappointment appeared on Naruto's face as had on Jiraiya's as it revealed a chubby, ankle-high toad. Jiraiya eyed the boy with slight disappointment as he failed to summon anything that could hope to challenge that giant snake in front of them. Orochimaru said something to Kabuto, but they were too far away from both Oto Shinobi to hear what it was, not that they needed to, because shortly after the giant snake reared back before launching himself at the gathered leaf shinobi. Jiraiya managed to shove Naruto roughly to the side before leaping away himself, leaving the snake to go hurtling into the ground, causing it to crack and splinter at the impact. "Why are you running, Jiraiya?" Orochimaru called as the snake regained its bearings. "Your opponent is me. Give up on the boy, he'll die eventually anyway. Why not let it be at the hands of a shinobi of my caliber?" Jiraiya turned quickly, his hands flashing through numerous seals at a speed that put the majority of shinobi to shame before stopping and shout, "Doton, Yomi Numa." Orochimaru's amber eyes went wide. The ground around the snake turned from the hard rocky soil into a deep, marshy swamp in a matter of seconds. The swamp constricted his snake, not allowing it to move and keeping from attacking again. With a single jump, Jiraiya made his way onto the head of the snake, meters away from Orochimaru, who seemed completely undisturbed by the close arrival of his old teammate, just continuing to stand there as if Jiraiya was nothing but an academy student to him. Beneath the 2 Sannin and on the ground, Shizen and Kabuto were engaging in battle. No matter how skilled the young woman was at medical jutsu, she just wasn't a battling shinobi. Even Naruto could see that. She wasn't as proficient at using her medical jutsu as offensive weapons like Kabuto was. Shizen exposed her forearm, a weird contraption attached to it which promptly fired off several Senbon at the Oto medical shinobi, all of which Kabuto avoided before charging at Shizen. His hand flaring with chakra, the dark-haired apprentice barely managed to jump back in time to avoid contact. As she dove backwards, she inhaled and spat a mass of thick purple fog out of her mouth toward Kabuto. The fog cleared and Kabuto was nowhere to be seen. Shizen looked around for any sign of the man, her eyes lingering a little at the motionless form of Naruto, which still hadn't gotten up after Jiraiya pushed him out of the way of Orochimaru's snake. With a crack, Kabuto announced his return to the battle, Searing pain erupted in Shizen's legs as she felt Kabuto's arm burst through the ground underneath her and grabbed the back of her calves. My legs! Shizen gasped as she fell to her knees, her legs giving out underneath her. Off to the side and away from the battles, Naruto stirred, managing to sit up, shaking his head as he turned to face the battle. He could see Jiraiya and Orochimaru fighting on top of the snake, and even without the use of his arms, Orochimaru seemed to be holding his own against Jiraiya and Shizen. Well, Shizen wasn't faring well at all. Kabuto was stood over her as Shizen desperately tried to heal her legs, giving the short black-haired woman the same smile he had given Tsunade before kicking her. He delivered a punch right to the woman's jaw. A sickening crack followed which made even Naruto wince. Naruto watched with dismay as Kabuto walked towards Tsunade. Tsunade still hadn't moved from her position. She seemed almost catatonic with fear, her shaking still not ceasing. This was the woman he was supposed to protect, the future Hokage of Konoha. He wasn't going to let some worthless traitor touch her. Getting to his feet, ignoring the pain that seared through his body as he did so, he moved at speed he didn't know he could, fully intent of getting between Kabuto and Tsunadeheim and stopping that bastard Kabuto. Naruto stopped in between Kabuto and Tsunade. Kabuto's fist already on its way to connecting with Tsunade. Naruto had barely arrived in time to stop the fist and hadn't had time to intercept the fist, instead taking the punch himself. His head snapped back at the force of it. Naruto, Kabuto growled, I told you you'd die if you interfered. Naruto turned his eyes back upon Kabuto. His face contorted with anger, teeth bared in an animalistic manner, his strange whisker-like marks on his cheeks seemed deeper and more pronounced, but it was his eyes that had changed the most. His eyes had gone from bright blue to a cool metallic silver color that covered the entire eye. Concentric circles getting progressively larger marked the silver which covered where the whites of his eyes should have been. Your Kabuto stuttered, your eyes. Naruto delivered a kick to Kabuto's gut which sent him stumbling a few feet backwards. That gave the young genin enough time to summon a Kage-Bushin, momentarily pausing as his eyes were assaulted with multiple points of view, making him blink in surprise before quickly focusing his chakra and letting the clone mold it into the spinning sphere of chakra that Jiraiya had been trying to teach him. As Naruto dove as Kabuto, the sphere of chakra, spinning wildly in his hand, Kabuto dodged it, leaving Naruto to flying to a rock. The rock shattering into 1,000 pieces as the ball of chakra hit it. You can't hit me, Naruto, Kabuto sneered. You are a failure, Uzumaki. A nothing, nobody, just a demon. I'm not a demon, Naruto roared as she got back up from his failed attack. That seal on your stomach says otherwise, Kabuto told Naruto. The only thing you'll be remembered for is holding the beast. Nothing more. Shut up. I don't know what happened to your eyes, Kabuto told Naruto. Perhaps a side effect of the Kyuubi, but it won't save you now. You'll be just another name on that worthless rock Konoha is so fond of. Kabuto charged, his hand gripping a kunai. Naruto managed to create another clone before Kabuto got any closer, a plan formulating in his mind as Kabuto closed in on him with his kunai pointed at his heart. Run, Naruto! Tsunade screamed. Naruto's clone looked at the women in shock, the images of Tsunade no longer shaking in fear being sent back to the original Naruto. It was too late, however. Kabuto lunged forward, the kunai resting between his fingers to make sure it would pierce his heart, just as Naruto had hoped. Naruto at the last second moved his hand in front of his heart, the kunai piercing straight through the palm of his hand. His hand then closed around Kabuto's fist, tightly gripping it despite his own injury. Until I become Hokage, Naruto growled between ragged breaths, I refuse to die. Naruto stretched his free hand out and began to gather what was left of his chakra, and the clone began to mold the chakra. The ball of chakra forming again, Naruto smiled in triumph as he saw Kabuto's eyes widen as he realized what was about to happen. Swinging his free arm, the ball of chakra hit Kabuto in the chest, sending him spinning through the air before landing in the floor with a crack. Those eyes, Orochimaru gasped in surprise as he watched Naruto send Kabuto flying through the air. He and Jiraiya had come to a standstill, much to his dismay. His old teammate's strength had returned much sooner than he would have liked. It can't be. Orochimaru turned his eyes once more to Jiraiya, who he saw was watching wide-eyed at the scene below them. You know those eyes? Orochimaru asked breathlessly, his head cocked to the side as he tried to figure out how Jiraiya knew about an eye technique that he had never seen. Jiraiya turned his attention back to Orochimaru, looking at him shocked in those dark brown eyes that no longer held the ties of friendship that they once had. Every shinobi worth his salt knows those eyes, Jiraiya told Orochimaru with a hint of smugness. It's thanks to those eyes you're able to use ninjutsu. Could it be? Surely it wasn't possible? Those eyes, the eyes Jiraiya had alluded to, were nothing but a legend. A legend created by the shinobi, a myth. He had never once dreamt that they were real. But they were in front of him, he could see them with his very own eyes. What powers did hold? It was rumored they allowed the legendary Sage of Six Paths to master all of the elements, to master things no other man had even dreamed of. To think that those eyes had awakened in that child, the child already advantages or disadvantage depending on your view, over other shinobi, but with these eyes he could become a force of nature. A god among shinobi, more powerful than anybody. He could not have that. He could not have somebody with the potential to threaten everything he had worked so hard for. No, he would not waste those years of research, those years of failed attempts, and years of trying to master every jutsu only to be undone by some brat who bears the sage's eyes. He was left with only one option. Nobody knew the true power of the Rinnegan, nobody still alive had ever seen the Rinnegan in action, but if its legend was true, even a fraction true, then he had no choice. He had to kill the brat before he had started to master the power of those eyes. Yes, the beast would not leave this wasteland. With that final thought, Orochimaru dived of the still trapped body of his summoned snake suddenly, plummeting towards the ground at breakneck speed. His amber eyes fixed on the body of QB container. He was so close. Perhaps he had underestimated the boy. Forget the Sharingan, if he could get his hands on the Rinnegan he'd be unstoppable. A true shinobi force, to think such eyes were wasted in possession of such an untalented brat. Please, Tsunade sobbed as she placed her hands on Naruto's chest, her chakra flaring suddenly as she tried to heal the young boy. He had fought so bravely for her, ignoring the obvious stress that his body was feeling to protect her. He'd beaten a shinobi who, despite what Naruto had said earlier, was closer to Jonin standard than his rank would suggest. He'd risked his life repeatedly for her. She wouldn't let him die. Ha! Naruto managed to say as he coughed, blood trickling down out of the corner, as his lips quirked into a soft smile. Tsunade felt herself getting lost in his almost hypnotic eyes. She ideally reminded herself to talk to Jiraiya about this latest development before she felt a hand brush against her breast. Looking down, she saw Naruto's blood-soaked hand clutching at her necklace. I guess Ero-Sennin was right. He coughed violently again. You really are a terrible better. With that, Naruto gave the necklace a yank. The chain that held it around her neck gave way and fell onto his chest. You're going to make a wonderful Hokage, Naruto, Tsunade said quietly as Naruto closed his eyes, slipping once again into unconsciousness. Touching how a boy you didn't even know would nearly kill himself and to protect you, the unmistakable voice of Orochimaru hissed, touching but pathetic. I don't know what you want, Orochimaru, Tsunade growled, standing for the first time since attempting to attack Kabuto, but I want heal your arms. You're wasting your time here. Oh, I'm not after my arms being healed anymore, Tsunadeheim, Orochimaru informed her with a twisted smile. There's one other way to get my arms healed, and no, I'm here for something much more important. Tsunade stood her ground protectively over Naruto. Oh really, and what would that be? His eyes. Orochimaru hissed, his own amber eyes becoming merciless as he lunged at her, his mouth open in the most unnatural way, a snake appearing where his tongue should be, hissing and twisting violently before opening its jaw and shooting a sword out of its mouth. He was aiming to kill her. Without her there, he would have free reign on Naruto. She'd protect him like he had protected her. She'd die for him. Orochimaru gained closer and closer. And with every step he took, she braced herself for what she knew would likely kill her. Orochimaru didn't aim to injure, he aimed to kill. This was no different. Rinnegan! Out of the ground, barely a meter in front of her, Jiraiya shot out the Rinnegan, fully formed and buried into the stomach of Orochimaru, whose eyes were wide as both he and Jiraiya flew into the air. It appeared in his greed Orochimaru had become distracted and not paid enough attention to Jiraiya's whereabouts. Jiraiya landed first and upon landing fell back beside her, flashing a grin at her, as he had done so many times in the past. It was comforting in an odd sort of way. She'd spent most of her childhood trying to beat that stupid grin off of Jiraiya's face, but now it was comforting to see such a familiar face which was trying to kill her or Naruto. Seconds after Jiraiya had landed, Orochimaru followed, landing feet away from them, his clothes ripped and exposing the torn flesh of his stomach, which was bleeding heavily as a result of the Rinnegan. The wound didn't seem to bother Orochimaru, who continued to stare at both of them. Even I cannot beat you both, Orochimaru admitted begrudgingly. I am not stupid enough to try to, till we meet again, old friends. The ground seemed to swallow Orochimaru, whose figure seemed to slowly sink deeper and deeper into the ground until nothing remained, and it was like Orochimaru had never been there. A soft bang caught the remaining Sennin's attention. Smoke had appeared where the body of Kabuto had laid since Naruto had managed to take him out of the equation. Tsunade, Jiraiya said, trying to get her attention. Not now, Jiraiya, the women snapped. We have to get Naruto to a place he can rest. He's exhausted and I didn't finish treating him earlier. Shizen needs treatment as well. Okay, Jiraiya nodded in agreement. Back to the village you were staying in. It's the closest, and the kid should be fine within a few hours. It'll have to do, Tsunade agreed. You get the gaki, I'll heal Shizen. Jiraiya nodded and moved towards the unconscious form of Naruto, turning his head over his shoulder saying, Tsunade, we have much to discuss when we get the chance. It's more important than you could imagine. His injuries were all healed. There had been nothing serious about the young boy's injuries. All that had remained of the injuries were a few additional scars to the boy's already impressive collection. Of course, that didn't mean that his injuries hadn't worried Tsunade half to death. When facing somebody of Orochimaru's caliber, and somebody with the anatomy knowledge that Kabuto had demonstrated, injuries were not always visible. Tsunade had checked him over numerous times just to make sure that she hadn't missed anything. The only explanation to why he was still sleeping was that he was exhausted. Perhaps those 2 Rinnegan had taken more out of the boy than either she or Jiraiya had anticipated. Thankfully, Shizen's injury had been one that she had been able to heal quickly, and her long-time traveling companion and friend had only been too happy to help her check over Naruto. Another pair of eyes had never hurt anybody. Tsunade had to admit she was impressed with her apprentice. She'd never really seen Shizen in a combat situation, and before last night had never really given it much thought. Their travels had never resulted in any need for either herself or Shizen to demonstrate their skills. More often than not, people just assumed they were just civilians traveling through. Perhaps when she officially assumed the role of Hokage, she could implement more emphasis on medical jutsu. If anything had been proved from last night, it was how useful medical was. For both offensive jutsu and looking after your teammates, perhaps now she could implement the one medical specialist per team idea that she had had all of those years ago. Maybe becoming Hokage did have its advantages. A soft knock at the door broke her away from the various ideas she had swimming around her head. There was only one person who that could be, what with Shizen currently in town stocking up on her supplies. Without waiting for her to answer, the door slowly creaked open. Tsunade saw the familiar white hair before she saw his face. Jiraiya looked the same as he always did. His long white hair tied loosely behind his head and falling down his back, the familiar dark green jumpsuit with the sleeveless red jacket draped over. She found herself a little envious that Jiraiya had aged so well, not that she would ever tell Jiraiya that, whilst she was forced to hide behind her jutsu. Is everything okay? He asked her, looking at her with a worried expression. Everything's fine, Tsunade replied calmly. He's just exhausted. Those Rinnegan must have really taken it out of him. Don't you think he's a little young for a technique of that rank? I didn't think he could do it, Jiraiya replied as he took a seat on the windowsill. I only told him about it to stop him bugging me. The kid is really persistent. Now you know how me and my grandfather felt, Tsunade informed her longtime friend and longtime pain in the ass. Hey! Jiraiya exclaimed, a look of outrage across his face. I was never as bad as the Gaki. He could work in the interrogation division. His level of irritation would have people spilling their guts faster than a genin after too much sake. You don't think that, Tsunade told Jiraiya with a raised eyebrow, almost challenging him to disagree with her. I saw the way you were when he wanted to fight Kabuto. Well, I can't deny the kid has certain charms, Jiraiya acknowledged, and what type of godfather would I be if I let him run off into battle against people who'd kill him in a heartbeat? Do I need to point he did that anyway? Tsunade asked with a raised eyebrow. Hey, I was occupied. I'm only one man, you know, Jiraiya told her before winking lecherously at her and putting on what she could only assume he thought was a charming smile, wiggling his eyebrows perversely and saying, and what a man! You're an idiot, Tsunade snorted. Do these lines ever actually work? Yup, Jiraiya replied smugly like a charm. Then I am losing faith in my gender, Tsunade replied sadly before looking back up at Jiraiya and asking, why are you here? I've known you too long to think you've just come by to tell me about your way with women. I'm just checking my godson is doing okay, Jiraiya replied, trying to and failing to look convincing. Bull, Tsunade growled. There's something you want to tell me and I know there is. So just tell me. It's complicated. Jiraiya sighed, and seeing her looking expectantly at him he relented and continued, do you remember the war? Tsunade rolled her eyes. Of course I remember the war. Which one specifically? We seem to have spent most of our younger years in one war or another. The Second Great Shinobi Wars, Jiraiya replied deadpanned. How could she forget that war? That war that had cost her so much, the lives of her lover Dan, her brother Nawaki along with countless friends, and all that was achieved was the buffer land, now known as the River Country, between Konoha and Suna being created. It seemed like such a small price to pay for hundreds of lives. Team Senju had been, in many people's opinions not just her own, the turning point of the war. Their stalemate with Sansho no Hanzo had caused Amigekyo no Sato to pull out of their treaty with Sunigekyo no Sato, leaving the sand considerably weaker, and no match for Konoha forces. Of course, whether or not Hanzo decided to step away from the war as a mark of respect to them and their abilities, or because the three Sannin had effectively crushed his village to dust in their pursuit of him, Tsunade didn't know. Though she personally suspected the latter. What about them? Do you remember after our battle with Hanzo, Jiraiya asked as we made our way back towards Konoha, we stumbled across those 3 little orphans? Yeah, Tsunade nodded, remembering the 3 he was talking about. Yeah, I remember them. You stayed behind with them if I recall? She knew that she was right. She may be getting on in years, but she wasn't quite that old yet. Her memory was as sharp as it had always been. She had just spent too many years in the company of Jiraiya to know that if he didn't want to speak about something, it was incredibly difficult to get him to do so. She had long since discovered it was best to gently guide the old fool along, so he revealed what he wanted in little chunks. Sure, it was like getting blood out of a stone, but it was the only way to get personal information from Jiraiya, and when it was obviously important, it was vital. She knew it. I did, Jiraiya replied with a nod, nearly 3 years in a makeshift hut in the ruins of Amigakure. I don't understand? Tsunade asked. Why was he telling her this now? It had been nearly 30 years since they had stumbled across those 3 little orphans. What significance could they possibly hold now? I looked after them, trained them until they were good level shinobi for nearly 3 years after you left. Jiraiya informed her, looking out the window lost in thought. It was rare to see another side to Jiraiya other than his loud and brash personality. It was rather unnerving if truth be told. I never did get why you stayed behind so long, Tsunade told him. They were just orphans. There were hundreds of orphans, and we'd seen a good portion of them. Why did those kids make you stay behind? Do you remember the kid who came asking for food? Tsunade nodded, remembering the solemn face of the young boy, his spiky hair caked in mud and dirt, looking like he just stepped out of the rubble. And Jiraiya continued, his name was Yahiko. Brave little kid he was. Always looking out for the other 2, he was the leader. He begged me to teach him jutsu so he could protect his friends. I'd been reluctant, you know me, I was never much of a teacher. Tsunade knew that wasn't strictly true. Nobody who had trained the Yondaime Hokage could claim to be a bad teacher. The things the Yondaime had done were truly spectacular, and many of it was due to Jiraiya and his teachings. Well, I didn't really have much choice in the end, Jiraiya told her. I woke up one day to Konan, and you must remember the little blue-haired girl, screaming hysterically. I thought we were under attack, that the war had restarted and Amigakure was under invasion. It wasn't though, was it? Tsunade asked, knowing full well it wasn't. Amigakure hadn't been involved in another full-scale war until the Third Great Shinobi War. No, Jiraiya told her, it was Yahiko. He'd been attacked by a shinobi from Iwagakure no Sato. When I arrived, I found little Nagato sat beside the body and unconscious Yahiko. He'd killed a Chunin with no training at all. Nagato? Tsunade repeated, getting images of a small timid little boy with a mop of bright orange hair that completely covered his eyes. He had those eyes, Tsunade. Jiraiya told her, a hint of confusion in his voice. He possessed the Rinnegan. What? Tsunade gasped. How was this possible? That little boy in the ruins of Amigakure had the legendary technique that had belonged to the Sage of Sixth Paths, the man responsible for creating ninjutsu. No wonder Jiraiya stayed with them so long. Do you know what the Rinnegan looks like, Tsunadeheim? Jiraiya asked curiously. She didn't. She had heard stories of the legendary eye techniques, but she had just assumed it was a myth. She knew of many Kekkai Genkai that could be found in their world, held 2 of which resided in her own home village. But in all her travels to many villages of the shinobi world, many of which some shinobi had never even heard of, she had never seen or even heard rumors of anybody possessing the Rinnegan. No, Tsunade admitted, no, I don't. You do, Jiraiya informed her, for the first time in 10 minutes, taking his eyes away from the window and focused on her. You saw it last night. With that, Jiraiya cast a look at the unconscious form of Naruto. Tsunade followed his line of sight, and quickly snapped her vision back up to Jiraiya. He couldn't be saying what she thought he was, could he? The changes in Naruto's eyes, that cold metallic silver with those odd concentric rings, was that the Rinnegan? Impossible, Tsunade breathed, looking at Jiraiya like he had gone mad for even suggesting such a thing. It's true. You don't forget the sight of the Rinnegan once you lay eyes on it, Jiraiya told her. But how? Tsunade questioned, still struggling to believe that the change in Naruto's eyes was that of the Rinnegan. Perhaps it's not the Rinnegan. Maybe it's just a product of the Kyuubi? We've seen him with the whisker marks, maybe this is just another trait? No, Jiraiya denied with a shake of his head, it's the Rinnegan. It's almost identical to Nagato's. It can't be a product of the Kyuubi. Almost? Tsunade asked with a frown. What do you mean, almost? Nagato's was a dull purple, almost gray. Jiraiya told Tsunade, but the pattern, those circles from his pupil. It's unmistakable. But how? Tsunade asked, still skeptical about this whole situation. Konoha never had the Rinnegan Kekkai Genkai. We'd have known if we had. There were and still are entire clans for the Sharingan and Byakugan, but not so much as a whisper about the Rinnegan. Hell, I don't think many people in Konoha even know of the third eye technique. I don't know, Jiraiya admitted. I have theories. Thoughts that have swam around my head since last night, but nothing concrete. I doubt we'll ever know for sure how this has happened. Let's hear them then, Tsunade demanded. Does it matter, Tsunade? Jiraiya sighed, running a hand through his hair tiredly. Seeing the women glaring at him, he continued with a huff. When Nagato first awakened his Rinnegan, he had no idea what it was. He had no idea. I had to explain it, with my limited knowledge of such a Kekkai Genkai, to him. Your point? Tsunade asked, getting slightly annoyed at how little information Jiraiya was actually revealing. That unlike the other eye techniques, Nagato wasn't taught about it, didn't expect it, and didn't know anything about it. Jiraiya snapped. Does that sound like a clan to you? No, Tsunade admitted, slightly taken back about how agitated Jiraiya was becoming. Most clans teach about their Kekkai Genkai even before they have awoken their bloodlines. Exactly. Jiraiya replied enthusiastically. It was odd back then that Nagato didn't know of his bloodline, and now, well, maybe it makes sense. Nagato said his parents had been killed by foreign shinobi, but even so you don't get to 13 and not know of your bloodline unless Nagato's family themselves didn't know. Is that even possible? Tsunade asked immediately. Think about it. Is there a massive clan for the Rinnegan like there is for the Sharingan and the Byakugan? No, you never hear anything about those eyes, which means it's incredibly rare. Not the type of technique that awakens in every clan member. How do you know that? Didn't you say Nagato's family was wiped out in the war? Tsunade asked. No, Jiraiya corrected, I said his parents were killed. But surely if the boy had had family he wouldn't have been sleeping rough and begging for food, Tsunade pointed out. If he had family, wouldn't we have heard about more Rinnegans? That's just it, Tsunade, Jiraiya said. Have you ever heard of somebody possessing the Rinnegan? I hadn't before teaching Nagato and haven't since. So what are you saying? That Naruto and Nagato are related? Tsunade asked, her eyebrows rising at the implication. They must be, Jiraiya nodded in conclusion. The Rinnegan is a bloodline. It flows through families, not just random shinobi. But like you said, the Rinnegan isn't exactly common. How did it get from Amargaker, where there may or may not have been a clan, to Konoha? Tsunade asked Jiraiya, getting increasingly frustrated with the fact that every time they came close to an answer it opened yet another door. Any number of ways, Jiraiya exclaimed. You remember the amount of refugees that flooded to Konoha during and after the war. It's possible that one of those refugees possessed the dormant bloodline, perhaps without ever realizing. But that means either Minato or Kushina, Tsunade told Jiraiya, who nodded slowly. How could the Rinnegan not be activated by either one of them? Both of them were exceptional shinobis. I have an idea about that too, Jiraiya revealed. The Sharingan is awakened when it is most needed. The Byakugan is the rare example of being active from birth. In both cases that I saw the Rinnegan active, it was in times of immense distress. Perhaps whichever refugee arrived with it simply hadn't suffered that type of distress for it to activate. Tsunade opened her mouth to reply but was cut off by a sudden groan from the bed that sat just a few meters away from where both she and Jiraiya stood. Naruto's eyes flickered for several moments before slowly opening, then blinking at the sudden intrusion of the light. His eyes still that odd metallic silver that seemed so out of place. Tsunade found herself missing those bright blue eyes that had defiantly told her he'd mastered the Rinnegan. Tsunade watched as his eyes flicked to various parts of the room. A frown appeared on his forehead in apparent confusion, and the soft ripple of the sheets that covered him from the shoulders down indicated that he was stretching his body. The wince on his face told her that she was right, his body was hurting today. His eyes settling on both herself and Jiraiya, a momentary look of confusion filtered across his face, and he cocked to the side and blinked like an owl. Tsunade managed to sneak a glance at Jiraiya, who had not taken his eyes of the boy. What's the matter, Naruto? Jiraiya asked, this time meeting her eyes in a quick glance of concern. What's wrong with my eyes? Naruto asked, looking worried. Is that your chakra? There was a pause. Neither Jiraiya nor Tsunade said anything. On her part, it was mainly because she didn't know what to say. She was so out of her depth. What's going on? Naruto sounded utterly confused. I never used to be able to see chakra? Is it the Tsunade saw him glance at her suddenly, and Jiraiya giving him a nod. It was odd to see Jiraiya acting almost fatherly, and giving somebody permission to speak. Kyubi? Tsunade couldn't help but notice him almost wince as he mentioned the demon fox. He'd said the name of the demon in a low, quiet voice, understandably, due to the fact that Sarutobi had made it illegal to mention the Kyubi no Yoko being sealed within Naruto. At least that was what she'd been told. No, Naruto, it isn't the QB. Jiraiya answered quietly as he moved away from the windowsill that he had been perched for the last hour or so and down onto the side of the bed that Naruto was staying in. Then what is it? Naruto asked, sitting up against the battered headboard, exposing his torso and the tip of his seals showing. Jiraiya glanced at Tsunade, who could offer him nothing more than a shrug. Jiraiya looked down at Naruto's curious eyes and opened his mouth several times before closing it again, apparently struggling to find a way to start. Naruto's ringed eyes looked at the Sennin expectantly. You know of dojutsu, right, kid? Jiraiya asked. Yup. Naruto proclaimed proudly, like the Sharingan and Byakugan, right? Exactly, Jiraiya nodded in agreement. Now what many shinobi don't realize is that there is a third dojutsu. It's incredibly rare and said to be very powerful. It's said that the creator of ninjutsu possessed it. It's called the Rinnegan. It can't be that awesome, Naruto replied defiantly, crossing his arms across his chest and looking at Jiraiya, otherwise Iruka-sensei would have mentioned it at the academy. Perhaps that's because for many shinobi the Rinnegan is nothing but a myth, Jiraiya told Naruto. Some believe that it died out a long time ago, others believe it just never existed, a fabrication of ninja folklore. But it's not, right? Naruto guessed. No, it's very real. Jiraiya answered, and it awakened in you during your fight with Kabuto. Naruto looked at Jiraiya for a few moments. Tsunade could see his eyes boring into the man. Like he didn't quite believe what Jiraiya had told him, not that she could really blame him. Jiraiya had just told him how rare this dojutsu was, only to reveal moments later that he now possessed it. If she were in Naruto's shoes, she didn't think she'd believe Jiraiya either. Prove it! Naruto challenged. Tsunade couldn't help but smile. His only experience with dojutsu was with the Sharingan and Byakugan, both of which could be activated and deactivated. Naruto no doubt expected to gaze upon his own familiar blue eyes as Jiraiya handed him a small mirror, normally used by civilian women to apply their makeup, and watched as Naruto examined his eyes closely. It seemed that the Rinnegan was different from the other dojutsu. Instead of being activated whenever the user needed, it seemed to be active permanently. He blinked noticeably a few times, like he thought the ripple-like effects were just an effect of him sleeping so long. He followed this up by rubbing one eye rather vigorously, and when he saw that his eyes still hadn't changed, he peered closer to the mirror, getting a good look at them before letting the small mirror drop onto the bed and peering back at Jiraiya. I don't understand? Naruto asked, looking completely confused. Jiraiya gave him a sad, apologetic smile before saying, I'm sorry, Naruto, but we're not completely sure what happened ourselves. I don't understand, Naruto repeated, his face scrunched up in confusion, whilst glaring a spot between where his feet rested. To just our bloodlines, that'd mean my parents would have had it. His voice was rapidly brightening with hope, and Tsunade could see where this conversation was heading and felt bad at the disappointment that she knew he would feel when he found nobody in Konoha to have or to ever have had the Rinnegan. I could check the archives. Their names must be there if the Rinnegan's as powerful as you say, Sennin. All the Sharingan users are there. The familiarity that Naruto spoke of the archives with made Tsunade wince a little bit. It didn't take much to realize why a little orphan boy would go looking through the Konoha archives. I'm sorry, Naruto, Jiraiya told the boy softly, but there has never been a Rinnegan user in Konoha. The only dojutsu that Konoha possess are the Sharingan and Byakugan. Naruto visibly deflated, his head dropping in disappointment. It was hard to watch, and whilst Tsunade had never and would never know the feeling of growing up an orphan, and could only imagine what it was like for Naruto to build the hope of being able to track down his parents with this new Kekkai Genkai. This only added to the sudden pang of guilt that appeared in the pit of her stomach. She could tell him who his parents were, but she had promised she wouldn't. Not until he was ready to handle such information, and she had to begrudgingly admit he wasn't anywhere ready to handle the information he was the Yandame's son. Well, maybe you're wrong, Naruto huffed, turning away from Jiraiya. I'm gonna check the archives anyway. You probably missed them because you were busy perving on some poor women. And anyway, there has to be someone else with the Rinnegan, or else I wouldn't have it. Naruto was so busy sulking that he completely missed the sidewards glance that Tsunade received from Jiraiya. One thought running through both of the Sennin's mind. Nagato. Not a word had been said for nearly 5 full minutes. And that was just fine with him. Naruto didn't know if they were thinking over what he had said or simply ignoring it, but it didn't really matter. He was checking the archives no matter what Sennin said. He didn't care if it took him all week. He'd scrounge through every scrap of paper that oversized library had to try and find out about his family. It didn't matter to Naruto if Sennin said there wasn't anybody in Konoha with this Rinnegan. He was determined to look. There must have been someone at Konoha with this Rinnegan, otherwise how would he have got it? Naruto may not have always been the best student back during his days in the academy, but he did listen occasionally, and he had been paying attention to when Iruka-sensei had taught them about Kekkai Genkai. He knew that they were normally passed down through the various clans of the shinobi villages. That there was no way they could be copied by or taught to other shinobi, so that meant one of or both of his parents had possessed this dojutsu, and if it was as rare as Erosenin had made out then somebody must have seen it. And if it was as rare as the pervert had said then surely that somebody would have made a record of it? At least now he had something specific to search for, unlike before which had been like searching for a needle in a haystack. "Hey Tsunade," Jiraiya asked after the few minutes of silence, "why don't you go and pack your stuff up and wait for Shizen? I think we'll be okay to leave soon." Tsunade looked like she wanted to do anything but pack up her stuff, but in the end she nodded and with a pleasant smile to Naruto left the room, leaving just Naruto and Jiraiya in the room. Jiraiya was still sitting on the edge of Naruto's bed, still facing the window despite the fact Tsunade had left, paying no attention at all to the sour expression on the face of the boy behind him. "You know," Naruto said thoughtfully, causing Jiraiya to look at the boy over his shoulder, "when I learn how to use these eyes I'm gonna be the strongest shinobi that Konoha has ever seen." A twinkle had emerged in Jiraiya's eye as he listened to Naruto's exclamation. It was so familiar to him. Like a severe stroke of déjà vu. "You should know," Jiraiya told Naruto, "just because you have those fancy eyes now doesn't automatically make you a great ninja." Naruto looked skeptically at him. All of the shinobi that he knew who had Kekkai Genkai had been hailed as prodigies. Uchiha Sasuke had been top of his academy class and everybody had expected him to make Chunin easily. Hyuga Neji had been the prodigy of the previous year's graduation class and was mastering his family's jutsu much to the surprise of the main branch Hyuga family elders. Hell, even little Hyuga Hinata had proven herself to be a strong shinobi when pitted against her cousin. Then there was Kakashi-sensei. Sure, he hadn't been born with the Sharingan, but he was revered now for being a powerful shinobi because of it. Naruto had heard the respect in the tone of Zabuza when he saw Kakashi, the copycat nin he'd been called legendary. He'd become legendary because of his use of the Sharingan. "It's true," Jiraiya told Naruto, obviously seeing the doubt on his face. "Having these Kekkai Genkai is a massive advantage, there is no doubt, but it doesn't necessarily make a good shinobi." But Naruto argued, "What about Sasuke and Neji? Both gifted shinobi, but it's not due to their eyes." Jiraiya told Naruto, "Did Sasuke have his Sharingan in the academy?" "Well, no," Naruto admitted, "he didn't awaken it till later." "And he was still top of your class without, right?" Jiraiya asked with a look that told Naruto he already knew the answer to that question. "Yeah," Naruto grumbled. "And last time I checked, the academy doesn't teach the Hyuga family jutsu, so Neji obviously works hard at them to master them," Jiraiya told Naruto, his bushy white eyebrows raised as if he had just pointed the obvious. "What I'm trying to say, Naruto," Jiraiya said before Naruto had chance to reply, "is that your eyes alone won't make you powerful. You have to train hard, learn new jutsu and master those eyes of yours. Hard work is the key to becoming a great ninja." Naruto didn't say anything back to Jiraiya. Maybe he was right? He'd seen the way Rock Lee had taken it to Sasuke and he can't even use ninjutsu. He'd also been a match for Gaara, managing to actually hit the Suna shinobi. And he'd heard rumors of Kakashi being considered a prodigy before he had even gotten the Sharingan, and then there was Shikamaru, and everyone had seen how smart he was during the Chunin exams. "Well then," Naruto said as he faced Jiraiya, a big grin present on his face, "I'm gonna master so many techniques I'll make the Yondaime look like a genin." By this time Naruto had stood on the bed and was all but shouting, looking like he wanted nothing more than to drag Jiraiya outside and start training on those jutsu right that second. "That's a bold claim to make," Jiraiya told Naruto, standing from his position, which was no longer as comfortable, with Naruto bouncing around the bed proclaiming his soon-to-be greatness. The fourth was one of a kind. Konoha had never seen a ninja like the Yondaime. "Psshhh," Naruto snorted in disbelief. "There's never been a ninja like Uzumaki Naruto before either." "There's a reason for that," Jiraiya mumbled under his breath. But was ignored by Naruto, who just continued to babble about how awesome he was going to be, the most awesome shinobi in the history of Konoha. "And when I've mastered those jutsu, I'm gonna create my own awesome techniques that'll take Konoha by storm." Naruto continued, now bouncing excitedly up and down in nothing but a pair of pajama bottoms. "Settle down, Naruto," Jiraiya requested, and was pleased to see that Naruto did indeed stop bouncing around on the bed. Anybody would think the boy hadn't been injured. "You're a long way from doing any of that." "Then teach me," Naruto exclaimed, looking excited at the prospect of being taught by a Sannin again. "I can't," Jiraiya told the boy, a hint of regret in his voice. "I don't know much about the Rinnegan. I don't even know what power it holds. Anything I teach you will be basic ninjutsu. It would be no use to you in mastering your Rinnegan. That's something you'll have to find the answer to on your own." Naruto now stood on his bed, his mouth hanging open slightly in shock. He had grown up hearing stories of Konoha's legendary Sannin. The old man had often told him stories about the three ninjas' advantages when he was younger, and when he had finally been asked to accompany one member of the Sannin to track down the other, he had been so excited. He was bound to learn techniques from him, even if he wasn't exactly what he had expected. Naruto knew that Jiraiya knew hundreds of awesome techniques like the Rinnegan, and for him to turn around and tell him he couldn't help him was crushing. Naruto had hoped that if he showed Jiraiya that he could master the Rinnegan, he'd teach him other techniques. It just didn't seem fair that just when he was getting some awesome training, his sensei turned around and said he couldn't train him because of those bastard eyes, because he didn't know enough about the Rinnegan. Again, it seemed that he was destined to fail. The Byakugan had a whole clan behind it, able to pass on their knowledge. Even the Sharingan, that no longer had a clan, passed on its knowledge through scrolls. And all Naruto got was a pair of weird eyes he hadn't even known had existed. Eyes that he didn't know how to use, eyes that not even a Sannin knew how to use. Then how am I ever going to learn how to use it? Naruto asked, looking at Jiraiya sadly. It was a stark contrast to the boy who had just moments ago been jumping up and down on the bed in excitement and proclaiming he'd outdo the great Yondaime. If you can't even teach me? I'm afraid that there isn't much documented about the Rinnegan, Naruto. Jiraiya told him. Everything that is known is more than likely based on myth. Great, Naruto grumbled sarcastically, that's so helpful. I have this all-powerful dojutsu and don't know how to use it. I said there wasn't much documented about the Rinnegan, Jiraiya told Naruto, eyeing him closely. I didn't say I knew nothing. A grin lit up on Naruto's face, the whisker-like marks on his cheeks crinkling under the force of the grin. His eyes lighting up with hope, making more of the concentric rings show. What do you know, Jiraiya-sensei? Naruto exclaimed, thinking it best to be respectful in this instant to the Arrow Sennin. Naruto gave one last jump on the bed, landing on his ass in a sitting position, the bed creaking under the force of his landing. Jiraiya looked at Naruto with raised eyebrows, making Naruto blush slightly in embarrassment, and scratched the back of his whilst smiling sheepishly. Naruto focused his entire attention on the white-haired man who was now casually leant up against the wall. This conversation, Naruto knew, would tell him important things about this Rinnegan, even if it didn't tell him exactly how to use it, and he couldn't afford to miss a word that the Arrow Sennin. If this Rinnegan was as rare as he had said, then Naruto knew that there might not be that many people who could give him any information on it. Well, Jiraiya started. Naruto sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hand, and watched Jiraiya intently, hanging on his every word. It said that the possessor of the Rinnegan can utilize any form of chakra. Eh? Naruto asked, looking utterly confused. The various forms of elemental chakra, Jiraiya explained, and seeing that Naruto was still looking confused, he explained further. Most shinobi have one specific element that they have an affinity for, the Uchiha and fire jutsu, for example. Naruto nodded, finally understanding. He'd seen Sasuke use fire jutsu more than any type of jutsu during their various training sessions and missions, but that seemed to be it. Naruto had never seen Sasuke use a water or earth-style jutsu. So shinobi can have only one elemental jutsu type? Naruto asked curiously. No, Jiraiya replied, shaking his head. Most Jonin-level shinobi have acquired the knowledge of two elements. Like Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked. Kakashi is a special case. Jiraiya answered, nodding at Naruto. Most Jonin are not capable of learning more than two element types because of the time and effort it takes to learn and perfect those jutsu. Kakashi has the advantage of only having to see a jutsu to be able to use it, allowing him to master more elemental forms than most. What about you? Me, Jiraiya said slowly. I am proficient at a few forms of elemental jutsu, but my main strength lays in other techniques. Oh, Naruto responded quietly, so I can use all the elemental jutsu? Effectively, yes, Jiraiya answered with a nod. You will not be limited in the jutsu you can learn. A massive advantage to you and your arsenal. But that'll take ages. Naruto whined. It's not like I'm Kakashi-sensei. I don't have the Sharingan to help me. I also think that the Rinnegan helps with the mastering of ninjutsu. Not to the degree of the Sharingan, but proficient enough to make a difference. Jiraiya said slowly. What? Naruto asked, looking at Jiraiya intently. Jiraiya started before trailing off. When I was younger, before I had even started to train the Yondaime, I trained 3 shinobi from Amurgaker. One of those shinobi awoke the Rinnegan whilst I was training them. He seemed to pick up ninjutsu much easier and quicker than the others. This also seems evident with you learning the Rinnegan in only 1 week. It took even me longer to learn it than that. You taught somebody else with the Rinnegan? Naruto repeated dumbly. I did, Jiraiya replied. It was years ago, Naruto. I haven't seen nor spoken to him since. So he had been right. There was someone else who possessed the same eyes that he did, Granted, this person wasn't a Konoha shinobi and didn't reside in Konoha, but the mere fact that there was somebody else out that had his eyes comforted him. There was somebody out there who knew how to use it, somebody who could teach him. Maybe he could teach me? Naruto asked hopefully. Bachan could send for him. Naruto, Jiraiya replied, Amargaker is not like Konoha. Amargaker no Sato is a war-torn village. It suffered greatly during the Great Shinobi Wars and has failed to ever rebuild itself into a stable village. There has been a bitter civil war between two factions within Amargaker for years. It's simply not a place you just walk into. I don't even know if he's alive. There's no way he can be dead. Naruto denied adamantly. If this dojutsu is as powerful as you make out, and this kid was as good with ninjutsu as you make, there's no way he died. Naruto, the Rinnegan doesn't make you invincible, Jiraiya told Naruto sternly. Amargaker is home to an exceptionally powerful ninja. He's like their Kage. If he went against him, then he has surely died, even with the Rinnegan. Naruto fell quiet. It really did seem he was destined to never find out the secrets of his eyes, and there were bound to be secrets to it. All dojutsu that he had seen had some special trait. The Sharingan with its ability to copy jutsu and the Byakugan with its 360-degree vision, and so far the only significant things that had changed with his recent development of the Rinnegan was seeing that weird mist-like glow around Tsunade, and somehow managing to see through his Kagebushin. Naruto, Jiraiya asked again. Naruto didn't like the tone of his voice. It made him feel uncomfortable. It was the type of tone somebody used when they were delivering bad news, and where he was concerned bad news was normally catastrophic. You can't go back to Konoha with those eyes. It'll attract too much unwanted attention for you and Konoha. What? Yelped Naruto. It won't take people long to realize what they are, Jiraiya told Naruto, and when they do, word will spread through the shinobi villages like wildfire about them. It's bad enough Orochimaru knows, but to have every nation aware of what a Jiraiya paused. It seemed to Naruto that he was trying to find the word to finish that sentence. Weapon Konoha possessed. Weapon? Naruto scoffed, interrupting Jiraiya. I don't even know how to use it. You think that'll matter? Jiraiya asked somewhat mockingly. They'll see a little boy with the most powerful dojutsu known to shinobi, one that was thought to be a myth. And no matter what, those shinobi will listen to the myths instead of trying to find out the actually powers. We'll have every hit squad and missing nin at Konoha's borders within days. Yeah, so what? Naruto argued. I kicked the last shinobi to attack Konoha's ass, and I'll do it again. These won't be a genin who can't control his demon. Jiraiya growled, a little anger seeping into his voice. These will be Umbu squads capable of things that you can only dream about. Sent to eliminate you before you learn the workings of your eyes. You'll learn soon enough that the other shinobi villages already think Konoha possesses too much power. This could tip that feeling over the edge. He made it sound so serious. He had no idea that him awakening a Kekkei Genkai would cause such a large snowballing effect on his village. Was it possible that the other villages would react the way Erosenin had suggested? Naruto couldn't understand why they would take something he had no control over as such a threat. Could the myth surrounding the Rinnegan possibly be bad enough to cause the other shinobi to try and assassinate him to prevent whatever they feared from happening? If Erosenin was right though, how would he stop people from seeing his eyes? They were his eyes. It wasn't like hiding his seal, which could easily be covered by clothes, and it was evident that the Rinnegan couldn't be deactivated like the Sharingan, so there was no way of hiding it. They're my eyes, Naruto pointed out. How do you hide your eyes? Naruto looked at Jiraiya, waiting for him reply to his question. How could he hide his eyes from the people of Konoha? Here was always sunglasses, he supposed. They seemed to do a good job at hiding Shino's eyes, but what happens if they broke? Or got knocked off? For somebody who utilized long-range attacks like Shino did, but for him who really only knew close-range attacks, they would more than likely get broken and reveal his eyes, which didn't solve the problem. I took the liberty of getting something last night whilst you were unconscious. Jiraiya rummaged around in his sleeveless red overcoat, his hand delving from pocket to pocket before he withdrew a mask. The mask itself was very similar to the style of mask that Haku had used when he pretended to be a hunter nin. It was white, almost unnaturally white, with the Konoha leaf symbol present on the forehead of the mask painted in bright red paint. On the cheeks of the mask were 3 whisker marks that were painted the same bright red paint as the Konoha leaf symbol. They were reminiscent of his own whisker-like marks. The eyes of the mask were more like slits than actual eye. How anybody could see out of such a mask was beyond him. What the hell is that? Naruto exclaimed, already knowing deep down what Jiraiya was proposing, and he wasn't particularly thrilled about it. It's a mask, Naruto, Jiraiya replied deadpanned. I can see that, Erosenin, Naruto growled. You can't be serious? Deadly, Jiraiya answered, handing the mask over to Naruto. It was the only solution that I could find that would hide your eyes effectively. Naruto nodded in understanding. There was definitely no way anybody in Konoha would be able to see his eyes when he was wearing this. And nobody would get him confused with ANBU because he wouldn't be wearing the uniform or have the tattoo that all ANBU officers possessed. But won't people question it? Naruto asked, knowing that when he returned to Konoha people were bound to ask questions about why he was suddenly wearing a mask. God knows he'd been around Kakashi-sensei enough to know how many people hassled him because of his mask. Jiraiya looked at Naruto before replying, "The best way to explain the new addition to your ninja gear will be that you got injured on the trip and that you have to wear it for medical reasons." Naruto snorted and looked at Jiraiya with a doubtful look in his eyes. "You expect that to work?" "Geez. It'll work when Tsunade backs it up," Jiraiya informed Naruto. "Nobody in their right mind questions Tsunade when it comes to medical issues." "What happens if the mask comes off?" Naruto asked. Whilst the mask was more sturdy than glasses, if he received a strong kick that happened to catch him right then, the mask would surely come flying off. "It won't, trust me," Jiraiya told Naruto with assurance. "It's modeled on ANBU's masks." Naruto placed the mask in his hands to the side before reaching up and untying his hitai and bringing it into his lap. He'd taken so much pride in that shiny piece of metal, been so proud that Iruka-sensei had given him his own hitai. He'd looked after it so well even when away on a mission, and now he wouldn't be wearing it, he'd be wearing this new mask. Picking the mask back up, Naruto lifted up to his face and placed it on. It felt strange having a mask on, though it didn't really feel like a mask, more like a second skin. The thin slit for the mouth proving to be just enough to avoid the mask getting hot with his breath, and the eye holes allowed him to see perfectly. "Perfect," Jiraiya announced. "Can't see so much as a pupil, let alone the entire eye." "Yeah, I guess," Naruto replied a little lethargically. He still wasn't sure about this. Whilst it did hide his eyes, it just felt strange not having his forehead protector on. "Don't worry," Jiraiya told Naruto, putting a hand onto his shoulder and offering him a smile. "You won't have to wear it forever, you'll soon have Iruka's old hitai back on. Now, what do you say we go see if Shizen's back? Now get dressed." They'd been walking for nearly 10 minutes, and the village that she had spent the best part of the last month staying in was rapidly disappearing behind her. She would never have guessed that after all these years she would be returning to Konoha. She'd always been sure she would never step foot back in that village, and here she was preparing to lead it. If the last few days were anything to go by, Tsunade sure had her work cut out for her. She didn't know if she could put up with Kekkai Genkai randomly springing up or people from her past seeking her out. Still, she had accepted the job. She'd have to take what came with it. And Tsunade knew it wasn't all bad. Shizen was coming with her, and then there was Jiraiya, yet perhaps that was more of a reason to not take the job than anything. Tsunade supposed that Naruto counteracted the negative impact Jiraiya had. That little boy was unlike anybody she knew. His sheer determination and unwillingness to back down from things where most other shinobi would have was something that she hadn't seen in a long time. It was endearing. The way he acted was almost exactly how Nawaki had done. The hyperness that had driven her mad during her teenage years, the stubbornness that had caused so many arguments in the old Senju household, but the same sense of pride that her little brother felt about being a shinobi of the leaf was ripe within Naruto. "That girl has the patience of a saint," the familiar voice of Jiraiya muttered beside her, causing her to follow the Toad Sennin line of sight until it rested on the figure of Shizen, who was walking about 10 meters in front of the old teammates along. Beside her, the short blonde figure of Naruto, who appeared to be jabbering away to the older girl adamantly if his hand actions were anything to go by. "Naruto does seem hyper today," Tsunade remarked as she watched him walk in front of Shizen, for the first time fully exposing the mask he was now wearing, his blonde hair sticking out at odd angles from around it. "I wasn't talking about her patience with Naruto," Jiraiya quipped with a wink at Tsunade. Tsunade grumbled. "So what story are we using for Naruto's mask?" Tsunade asked curiously after a moment of silence between the two. "You can't just have him turn up and say it's a fashion statement." "We'll say it's because of an injury," Jiraiya told her calmly. "If you say it's to be kept on, nobody will question it." "If you say so," Tsunade shrugged. She had no problem with it. She could completely understand why Jiraiya had made Naruto hide his eyes, and so would most who understood the importance of the Rinnegan, and the hassle it brought with it was something she really didn't want to deal with. "What are you gonna do when we get back to Konoha?" Tsunade knew that Jiraiya hadn't spent massive amounts of time in Konoha since his childhood. Once he had obtained the rank of Jonin, he'd been off, exploring the world as he put it. She personally thought it was more likely he was off searching for different women to peep on. "I'll probably stay around for a couple of weeks," Jiraiya told her with a sigh. "Take care of some issues. Then I'll have to go and check on my network, and take care of some business." Tsunade sent a long look at Jiraiya, like she was sizing him up. "If you're thinking about trying to find Nagato, don't," Tsunade told him bluntly. "You'll not get anywhere near Amergaker. Hanzo has it on lockdown." "Perhaps," Jiraiya replied mildly, giving her the impression he wasn't really listening to her. I'm serious, Jiraiya, Tsunade snapped in a whispered tone, careful not to alert Shizen or Naruto. That civil war has Hanzo and his army on edge. Shizen and I traveled to a village close to it a couple of months back, nearly handed us over because they thought we were trying to infiltrate it. I have my ways, Tsunadeheim, Jiraiya replied vaguely. Tsunade had little doubt that he had his ways, but she just didn't want him to get caught in the middle of what, by all accounts, sounded like a bloody civil war. Come on, Ba-chan. The unmistakable voice of Uzumaki Naruto called, making her take her eyes away from Jiraiya and focus on the mask-wearing boy. We have to hurry so you can heal Sasuke. The large, almost never-ending, circular wall that bordered Konohagakure no Sato had never been a more welcome sight for Uzumaki Naruto. He had spent what seemed like an eternity walking back from that village they had stayed in while searching for Tsunade, and sure, Shizen was cool to talk to, but there was only so much of talking to one person that he could take before he got bored. Jiraiya had refused to teach him any more techniques on the back, saying they couldn't afford to slow down and that it was important to reach Konoha as quickly as possible, something that Naruto personally thought was a load of crap as he didn't seem to have had a problem with teaching him on the way down to get Tsunade. And Tsunade, well, she was back to being grumpy, so that was a definite no-go area for a source of entertainment. The damn mask he was wearing was also stifling hot, which didn't make the journey any more enjoyable. He didn't know how the ANBU officers did it. Walking around all day wearing this flaming mask was like some twisted torture technique Ibiki and Enko would inflict to get information. Naruto was beginning to think that perhaps he hadn't quite it through before agreeing to wear this mask. Though he did think it made him look kinda badass. Looking up from the wall, Naruto could clearly see his favorite thing in Konoha, beside Ichiraku Ramen, the Hokage monument. He had spent many nights sitting on top of the monument, and watching as the citizens went about their daily lives. He had always sought comfort under the gaze of the past Hokages, and aspired to someday have his own face carved alongside them. His eyes didn't dwell on the monument for long, as they were drawn away from the faces of the past Hokages by a bright shimmering light that sat just above the monument. It was possibly the strangest thing he'd ever seen. It was just sat there, as if it had always been there, with what appeared to be several lines of similar light darting away from it in all directions, forming some sort of pyramid over Konoha. The light was so unexpected and so unusual that it actually brought Naruto to a stop, causing the large bulky form of Jiraiya to go walking straight into the back of him, almost sending both of them into a heap on the ground. Oh geez, Jiraiya grumbled as he rubbed the spot on his chest where Naruto's head had snapped back. A little warning if you're going to randomly stop to watch birds, kid. I wasn't watching birds, Naruto growled as he shot a dirty look over his shoulder at Jiraiya. I was watching the light. The light? Jiraiya repeated dumbly. Yeah, Naruto responded, pointing up to where the light was, the light. Are you sure Kabuto didn't kill a few brain cells in there? Jiraiya asked, tapping Naruto on the top of his head, which made the boy glare at the older man, not that Jiraiya could see it. Damn mask, there's nothing but clouds there. Naruto frowned. He definitely wasn't imagining things, there was definitely something unnatural about that light. Jiraiya walked away, shaking his head and muttering about crazy genins, leaving Naruto standing there looking at the weird pyramid-shaped light. I don't know how you know about that, the voice of Tsunade said in a hushed tone, making Naruto look away from the light and to the buxom blonde figure of the next Hokage, but I can have a pretty good guess. What you see is one of Konoha's many defense mechanisms to stop attacks upon Konoha, put in by my grandfather when Konoha was founded. There are only a handful of people in Konoha who know of its existence, and as your Hokage I'm going to have to order you to keep it that way. Naruto nodded with wide eyes. This was most certainly an interesting development. There was only one reason he could now see this barrier-like defense, and that was the reason he was now sporting a mask. He wondered what the formerly invisible barrier did. Perhaps if he figured out what the lines were, he'd get on his way to unlocking at least some secrets about his eyes. He guessed he knew his next stop after going through the archives. Tsunade had continued walking towards Konoha after delivering a very unsubtle threat to him about the secrecy of the weird translucent barrier, leaving Naruto having to catch up. By the time he'd caught up with Tsunade, it seemed Shizen and Jiraiya were already at the point of entry to Konoha and chatting pleasantly to whichever Chunin was on guard duty today. As Naruto and Tsunade hurried to catch up with Jiraiya and Shizen, Naruto couldn't help but notice that across the ground, barely a meter in front of the great wall that protected Konoha, a line of the same bright light that Naruto had seen sitting high above the Hokage mountain created a perimeter around the wall. So it seemed that this defense that Tsunade had mentioned was most likely some sort of barrier, though against what he couldn't figure out. It wasn't a very good barrier, as it seemed to let just anybody through, and if Tsunade was to be believed, it had been there for years, and if it was some kind of barrier to prevent people entering it, quite frankly, sucked. Naruto could remember after the Chunin exams where Suna and Oto Shinobi had flooded into Konoha. If this barrier was to prevent people attacking Konoha, then how did they get in after the Chunin exams? Naruto was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he completely missed the Chunin who was stood on the gate that controlled the entrance to Konoha, and didn't actually realize he'd passed the gate until he came to the small river that flowed through the outskirts of Konoha and stood on the edge of the bridge that led into the main part of the village. Naruto didn't care how much his fellow genin complained about how there was nothing to do for genin in the village. He loved his village, and no other village in his opinion would or could come close to Konoha. He loved the way that Konoha's streets were always filled with people, just normal people going to a bar or going shopping. He'd always thought the mixture of civilians and shinobi added something good to Konoha instead of it being all civilians or all ninja. After all, if it was civilians, who'd protect them? And if it was all shinobi, it'd be nothing more than a walking army. It hasn't changed a bit, Tsunade marveled as the group began to walk through the crowded streets that lead into the center of Konoha. Both Tsunade and Shizen were looking around the street with wide eyes. Naruto couldn't help but smile as Shizen got a little spring in her step as they meandered through the people. He guessed that old saying was true: home is where the heart is. Naruto wondered if Shizen harbored the same ill feelings toward Konoha as Tsunade did. Erosenin had told him all about why Tsunade had left the leaf, but he hadn't mentioned Shizen. Sure, Dan had been her uncle, but what about her parents? Well, I guess I should go and meet with the elders. Tsunade sighed as if she didn't relish the chance to meet the elders of Konoha. The elders were the only two people in the whole of the village to hold any sway over the Hokage, more like advisors than anything. At least that's what Iruka-sensei had said at the academy. Not that it really mattered, because when he became Hokage nobody would stop him from protecting the village. Best get this whole Hokage thing rolling. What? Naruto exclaimed from beside her. How she could possibly think of getting inducted as Hokage at a time like this. The whole reason that he had even gone to get her was so she could heal Sasuke and Lee, and there was no way she wasn't going to let her just swan off before she had chance to look at them. I've got to be sworn in, Tsunade grumbled, clearly not looking forward to such a prospect. I don't really have a choice. It was his ideas anyway, so don't go blaming me like I actually wanted this. She finished, pointing accusingly at Jiraiya, who chose to conveniently pretend to be examining a poster for a new restaurant that had opened. No, you have to come heal Sasuke, Naruto argued, grabbing hold of the elder woman's forearm and trying to drag her in the direction of Konoha Hospital. A flash of bright white light that emitted from Tsunade's lower body caught Naruto's attention and caused him to momentarily drop her arm, fearing he was about to receive a kick from the insanely strong woman. I can't heal him just now, Tsunade growled, yanking back her arm, the white light that had erupted from her legs dimming before slowly disappearing. Naruto's eyes shot quickly to Jiraiya and then to Shizen, both of whom didn't appear to have seen it, which wasn't surprising. Perhaps the light was something you couldn't see, chakra perhaps? Why not? Naruto whined. It's the only reason we came to get you. Tsunade's hands shifted to her hips, an action Naruto had seen Sakura use whenever she was pissed. Her eyebrow raised and she looked at him with a stern expression which looked out of place on her youthful face. And here I was thinking it was because you thought I was the best candidate to take over as Hokage, Tsunade responded challengingly. Pa! Naruto snorted. You? The best to take over from the old man? How even Erosenin would do a better job than you. Naruto could see Tsunade's face flush with anger and her left eye twitched. Her fists were clenched at her waist and trembled a little bit. Her breathing had gotten a lot heavier too. Naruto had to admit she was quick for an old lady. He hadn't seen her reach out and grab the collar of his orange jumpsuit, yanking him close to her and bringing her own face down to meet his own masked one, looking at him with a furious glare. Listen, you little brat, she hissed. I'm not your personal medic ninja. I have other important matters to attend to other than healing your little boyfriend. See, this is why you shouldn't be Hokage, Naruto commented as he yanked himself free from her grip and straightened his clothes. Hokages are supposed to be kind like the old man, not grumpy old women. But it doesn't matter, I don't need you, I have Shizen-chan, you will help, right? He turned to the dark-haired woman and looked at her what he hoped was his most flattering smile. I am well, Shizen stuttered, shooting a quick look at Tsunade. Please, Naruto implored, grabbing her hand and looking at her, which he supposed looked quite odd considering she couldn't see his face. You're just as good as Bachan, and much nicer. Well, Shizen replied, a crimson blush on her cheeks. I suppose it couldn't do any harm whilst Tsunade-senpai goes to talk to the elders. The kid's a natural, Jiraiya muttered, a real flatterer. Jiraiya winced as he received a quick slap across the back of his head from his former teammate, but it didn't change his opinion. Excellent, Naruto cried, doing an odd little jump whilst still managing to keep hold of Shizen's hand. Let's go. Sakura-chan will be so happy. With that, Naruto began to drag Shizen off down one of the man alleys that littered Konoha, leaving just Jiraiya and Tsunade to stand in the middle of the street, citizens of Konoha walking around them. That girl needs to grow a backbone, Tsunade mumbled as Naruto and Shizen disappeared. Or she just succumbed to his charm, Jiraiya mumbled, the kid's got potential. Looking to corrupt another poor innocent soul, Tsunade asked as she wandered off in the direction that she knew Hokage Mansion to be. Jiraiya hurried to catch her up and when level with her shot her a grin that she had seen many times. You call it corruption, Jiraiya informed her, I call it imparting wisdom. Tsunade rolled her eyes and continued in the direction of the Hokage Mansion hoping that Jiraiya would find somewhere else to be a nuisance. Shizen-chan, Naruto asked with a hint of concern in his voice as the two walked into the hospital reception. The cool air-conditioned air hitting both of them as they stepped through the automatic doors. Are you okay? The kunoichi was breathing heavily as was flushed with sweat. She looked slightly disheveled, her short black hair slightly wind-swept and her kimono not as neatly presented as it had previously been. Yeah, she panted, I'm just fine, just next time take it a little slower, okay? Ah, so she was tired. Strange, Naruto hadn't thought that he had been going that quickly. He always traveled around Konoha at that type of speed and it was important that they got to Sasuke quickly. Sure. Naruto grinned and scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, his mask covering his sheepish look. Good afternoon, the receptionist greeted as the two of them came to a stop at the large desk which the receptionist sat behind. What may I do for you? We're here to heal Uchiha Sasuke, Naruto exclaimed. And who would you be? The receptionist asked, looking at him curiously, no doubt due to not being able to see his face. Her eyes briefly flicked up to Shizen. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto informed her, and she's Shizen. She trained with the Godame Hokage. Tsunade sent her to heal him. Naruto, Shizen said, looking a little embarrassed, I might not be able to heal him. Of course you will be able to. Naruto exclaimed, you're awesome. You help fix me up, you're bound to be able to help Sasuke. Well, Shizen trailed off, looking uncomfortable with the amount of praise being heaped on her. Ah yes, the receptionist interrupted the discussion between the genin and medic Nin. Shizen, well, you're documented on Konoha's database. Uchiha Sasuke is on the 4th floor, room 11. Thank you. Shizen told the receptionist with a pleasant smile before setting off for the stairs, quickly followed by Naruto. She looked at Naruto and said, remind me to get Tsunade to check the hospital security measures. I could have been a missing Nin using a henge for all that women knew. Sure thing, Shizen-chan, Naruto exclaimed, not really paying attention to her, just concentrating on getting her to heal Sasuke as he bounded up the stairs 2 at a time. It didn't take Naruto long to get to the floor, even if there was what felt like a million stairs to the 4th floor. However, it did take Shizen a little longer to reach the floor, much to his irritation. Why was everyone so slow? At the first sight of Shizen, he had bounded off down the corridor, glancing at the doors to try and find the 11th room, though in the end he needn't have worried about looking at the numbers because it was painfully obvious which room belonged to Sasuke. The familiar sight of pink hair told him that that was the room which held the injured Uchiha. She had no doubt been a permanent fixture in the room since Sasuke was brought here by Mado Guy. She didn't look very happy from what Naruto could see of her. Her shoulders were slumped, and he was sure he could see the tracks of shed tears shining under the light of the room. Sakura, Naruto said, gaining her attention. For a minute a look of confusion crossed her eyes, like she couldn't tell who it was before her eyes settled on his bright orange jumpsuit. Naruto? Is that you? Why are you wearing a mask? It's illegal to imitate ANBU. She didn't stand or make to get out of her chair beside Sasuke's bed. She just sparred him the barest of glances before turning her eyes back upon Sasuke. Yeah, Naruto told her with a wave, though Sakura didn't notice the wave, her face still watching over Sasuke's prone form. And I'm not impersonating an ANBU officer, Sakura-chan. I have to wear it, it's our Bachan's orders. Bachan? Sakura asked dully with a tone that suggested to Naruto she didn't really care. Why is she making you wear a mask? Tsunade Haim. And I got injured on the mission. She said I had to wear this until she said so. Naruto exclaimed convincingly, the dull footsteps echoing through the corridor indicating that Shizen had finally caught up. The name of the Godame seemed to trigger a response from the girl, who twisted to look at Naruto with a hopeful expression on her face. You managed to get Tsunade here? Sakura asked, seemingly unconcerned that Naruto was injured now that the famous medic Nin Senju Tsunade had arrived back in Konoha. Yup, she couldn't see, but Naruto had a large grin on his face. He liked it when Sakura was pleased with him. It made such a pleasant difference from the angry Sakura who seemed to plague him, though she had to go to speak with the elders about becoming Hokage. I brought Shizen though. Shizen? Sakura asked, looking confused. She's Tsunade's assistant, Naruto explained, moving out the way to allow Shizen entrance to the room. Naruto watched as Shizen walked up to the side of Sasuke, passing Sakura and placing a comforting hand on the younger girl's shoulder before placing her own hand on Sasuke's forehead. Naruto watched, as like before with Tsunade, White light pulsed from Shizen's hand. Yes, it definitely seemed that light was chakra. Not long after Shizen had placed her hand on Sasuke's forehead did the boy start show signs of life. Sasuke groaned as Shizen withdrew her hand, turning and smiling at Sakura, who seemed to understand because she launched at Shizen, capturing the elder women in a hug. Naruto's eyes, however, were drawn to Sasuke, who sat up looking dazed. His hair was stuck up at all angles and his face paler than it normally was. Sakura, who upon seeing that Sasuke was awake, released Shizen and attached herself to Sasuke, tears of what Naruto can only assume was happiness already leaking from her eyes. Sasuke, to his credit, didn't push her away like Naruto thought he might. He just sat there letting Sakura hug him. Naruto felt that horrible feeling in the pit of his stomach of jealousy. Nobody had ever hugged him like that. Nobody had ever waited by his bed like Sakura had done for Sasuke. If the situation had been reversed and he had been in Sasuke's situation, would anybody have helped Erosen and get Tsunade to heal him? Seeing that both Sakura and Sasuke were occupied, Naruto slowly started to make his way the door. Perhaps Ichiraku's would open and he could grab a few bowls of ramen. Nothing like a nice hot bowl of ramen to ease your mind. Maybe Ichiraku even had some new ramen out. Yeah, that'd definitely hit the spot about now. Naruto immediately stopped by the door. He didn't think that Sasuke had even noticed him. He seemed pretty dazed, but apparently he had, and from the tone of his voice he didn't seem particularly happy. Then again, Sasuke never really seemed happy, he was really miserable. Naruto turned his head slightly, looking over his shoulder so that he could see Sasuke through the slits in his mask. Sasuke was sat there on the bed wearing what looked like a standard hospital pajamas. His arms hung limply by his sides, his head resting on Sakura's shoulder, though it didn't look like he had much of a choice in the matter. His eyes were not the Sharingan red Naruto had grown used to seeing, but the dark brown that they used to be during the academy. "I challenge you," Sasuke demanded in the unemotional voice that Naruto had grown accustomed to. "When I'm discharged, I challenge you one-on-one." Naruto knew what he wanted, and he'd be lying if deep down he didn't want to test himself against Sasuke. The prodigy of the class against the dead last. Naruto knew he was better now, but then again so was Sasuke. Perhaps if Gaara hadn't lost control of the Ichibi no Shikaku, then maybe he would have gotten the chance to fight Sasuke in the final? Naruto smiled beneath his mask. Out of the corner of his eye he could see Shizen watching the ongoing scene with interest. It must look strange to the short-haired women. On the bed you have the last Uchiha being hugged to death by a girl who the Uchiha seemed to have completely forgotten was even there, his focus being entirely on the masked genin who stood near the door. "Name a time and a place and I'll be there," Naruto replied with a nod before disappearing out of the door. The thought of his impending fight with Sasuke being pushed to the back of his mind. He had a much more important thought to think about. How was he going to eat ramen without taking his mask off? Maybe he'll have to speak with Kakashi-sensei about that particular technique. The archives of Konohagakure no Sato would have put the majority of libraries in the other hidden villages to utter shame. The sheer amount of documents that this single room possessed was unbelievable. There were shelves upon shelves filled with files on everything imaginable. Well, almost everything imaginable, as Uzumaki Naruto was finding out. Naruto had been back in Konoha the best part of 2 days and had only visited 3 places since his return: his apartment, Ichiraku's ramen stand, and the Konoha archives. But know how much he searched, he couldn't find anything about anybody that was living or had lived in Konoha who possessed the Rinnegan. In fact, he could only find one documented person who had possessed the Rinnegan, and that was the Rikudo Sennin, the creator of ninjutsu. And even with this mention, the details about the Rinnegan was vague, giving away nothing that Jiraiya hadn't told him. It seemed that Erosenin had been correct, that searching in the archives for any mentions, especially detailed mentions of the Rinnegan or anybody who possessed it, was a complete waste of time, as there was literally nothing about it. Hell, Naruto had seen more documents on unique toe fungus than he had on the Rinnegan. Of course, the archives were so vast, with records of everything, it was entirely possible that there was something, somewhere in this giant library that held the secrets to his eyes. It just meant he would have to spend his entire life lurking in the library searching for it, something which he personally didn't think he could do, as he'd likely go insane from boredom before he found anything useful. Maybe he would be better off trying to figure it out on his own. Of course, if he went that way, then there was every chance he would never figure anything out, and he'd be stuck with these weird eyes without actually being able to do anything with them. Just as Naruto was reaching for another book that undoubtedly had hundreds upon hundreds of pages, none of which he'd actually need, he was interrupted by a small furry missile launching itself at him. It didn't take long for Naruto to recognize who it was. It was the small, white, furry form of Akamaru. The little puppy stood just several feet away from him, barking obscenely at him like he actually understood what it was trying to say. He was drawing strange looks from the other people in the archives, all of whom looked less than impressed with the noisy little puppy that was interrupting their research. "Sure," Naruto hissed to the dog, which seemed to take this as indication that he needed to bark more. "Would you shut up?" Kiba should keep a muzzle on you. I'll do no such thing. Ah, there was the dog's master, thought Naruto, as the figure of Inuzuka Kiba came hurtling around the large wooden shelves that Naruto had taken up residence in during the last couple of days. Kiba looked the same as always, though Naruto thought he looked pretty tired, which was odd. Kiba had stamina which rivaled his own, so to see the boy panting, his hair sleek with sweat, was quite alarming. You okay, Kiba? Naruto asked with concern as the boy hunched over, hands on his knees and head between his knees. Yeah, Kiba replied, it's Sasuke. Sasuke? Naruto repeated. He hadn't given his teammate much thought since Shizen had healed him. He supposed he should go and visit him. Perhaps he'd been released by now and Team 7 could go on missions again. Yeah. Kiba exclaimed. He got released earlier today, and he's going crazy at Training Ground 8. Keeps demanding you come and fight him, says you promised. What? The Naruto trailed off and remembered what Sasuke had said to him as he left the hospital room where he had been recovering. I thought he was joking. Apparently he's serious, Kiba commented, drawing himself back to his full height. Sakura's trying to calm him down, but well, you know how useful she is around Sasuke. Everyone's there, he's going completely mental. If Naruto hadn't been wearing his mask, Kiba would have seen his eyebrows disappear into his hairline. He had honestly thought Sasuke was joking. They were teammates. The closest they had ever come to fighting was a supervised spar, but the way Sasuke had challenged him at the hospital made it sound like anything but. You better come over, Kiba told Naruto, as he scooped up Akamaru in his hands. I don't think he'll calm down otherwise. From the way Kiba was talking, it didn't sound like the Sasuke Naruto had come to know. The Sasuke he knew was calm and thoughtful, everything a shinobi prodigy should be. He had never seen Sasuke totally lose his cool. Well, he had, but when faced with the brother who had killed your parents and entire clan, it's kind of understandable that he'd gone a bit crazy. Now though, it seemed Sasuke had completely lost it. Yeah, Naruto replied a bit distantly, quickly gathering up the various books that had littered the place he had spent the last 2 days sitting, carefully placing them back onto the various shelves that they had come from. I'll be right behind you, Kiba. Kiba nodded before jogging out of the view, leaving Naruto to hurriedly place the books back and followed after the young Inuzuka. It was a bright day in Konoha. It almost made Naruto regret being cooped up in the archives. There was so much he could have been doing on a day like this, but it didn't matter now. Now he had to go and see why Sasuke was being a bigger asshole than usual. Naruto dreaded to think what it was Sakura was trying to do to get Sasuke to calm down. God knows everything the pink-haired Kunoichi seemed to do around Sasuke had the opposite reaction to what she was expecting. He was sure, whatever she was saying to get Sasuke to calm down was probably making him more and more agitated, as Sasuke always did in her presence. Training Ground 8 was one of the more crowded training grounds that Konohagakure no Sato possessed. Unlike the others, which were fairly barren, Training Ground 8 was filled with trees, bushes, and even a small stream. It was a training ground normally used to help train shinobi who specialized in infiltration. Naruto himself had only ever been in this training ground once, and that was during Kakashi-sensei's stupid bell test, a test that he would rather forget than relive. As Naruto followed Kiba onto the training ground, it was easy to see what the young Inuzuka had been saying. Uchiha Sasuke was pacing angrily up and down the shore of the stream. Naruto could see several shuriken embedded in one particular tree that seemed to have borne the brunt of Sasuke's anger. Like Kiba had said, Sakura was following Sasuke obediently as the last Uchiha paced up and down. It looked like she was pleading with Sasuke, who, as usual, just ignored her. Naruto's arrival at the training ground hadn't gone unnoticed. It seemed that Konoha's entire Rookie 9 was present, with Tenten and Niji casually stood by gate. Only Lee was missing, and was watching anxiously as Sasuke ceased his pacing. Sasuke stopped, immediately having his arm grabbed by Sakura, but the Uchiha didn't seem to notice as he was busy staring at Naruto, a demented smile appearing on his face and his eyes activating the Sharingan in an instant. Naruto, Sasuke breathed in excitement. The heads of the Rookie 9 swiveled back to Sasuke, and Naruto got the distinct impression that the Uchiha had been waiting for this moment since Shizen had awoken him. The way Sasuke stood perfectly still, now with a very pleased smile on his face, told Naruto that Sasuke had been anticipating this. I'm pleased you came, Sasuke continued, roughly shaking Sakura off his arm and giving her a quick look of disdain before turning his attention back to Naruto. I thought you might not. What do you want, Sasuke? Naruto asked with a tilt of his head. Sasuke was behaving very oddly, which was saying something, as he was normally aloof at the best of times. To prove I am the best, Sasuke told Naruto, to prove I don't need your help ever again, to prove I can beat him. This is what it was about. Sasuke's pride had been dented during the meeting with his brother. The immense power that Itachi had displayed during that little confrontation must have put Sasuke back in his place, and now Sasuke wanted to reaffirm his dominance. Well, Naruto wasn't going to help. If Sasuke wanted to fight somebody, he could just find somebody else. Naruto had much more important things he could be doing than taking part in Sasuke's petty games. Naruto span on his heel and turned to leave the training ground, much to the shock of the rest of Rookie 9, who seemed to think he would have launched himself at Sasuke by now. Maybe they didn't understand what he did. Jiraiya's message about being a good shinobi meaning hard work had really struck home with him. He wanted to find out what powers his eyes held, train with them and become strong using them. He didn't need to, or really want to fight with his teammate. "Why are you leaving?" Sasuke asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. "Don't you want to fight me? You used to challenge me all the time, only back then you weren't worth my time. Now I want to beat you." Naruto bit back a growl. He wanted so badly to go and fight Sasuke, but he knew that there was not a lot of point to it. Sasuke was his teammate, they had nothing on the line, nothing to gain. This was purely about Sasuke. And Naruto, quite frankly, didn't care if Sasuke was feeling weak and worthless at this moment in time. He had more important things to think about. "Are you scared?" Sasuke asked with a tilt of his head. Naruto came to a stop just before the gate that leads into the training area. "Scared to see what true shinobi can do compared to the Hokage's charity case?" "Scared?" Naruto repeated, his voice a growl as he looked back over his shoulder, his mask no doubt coming into view as he looked at Sasuke out of the corner of his eye, through the slitted eye hole of his mask. "Scared of you?" Naruto bit back a laugh and turned around, back to the training ground. "I'm not scared of anybody." "Then prove it," Sasuke whispered, whilst falling into his familiar taijutsu stance, an action that was mirrored by Naruto. "Naruto!" Sakura gasped, getting back into her position at Sasuke's shoulder. She seemed appalled that Naruto had accepted Sasuke's challenge despite initially turning it down. "Take that mask off," Sasuke demanded. "I want to look into your eyes when I beat you." Naruto ignored him, his lip curling into a snarl beneath his mask and his eyes narrowed. He curled his hands into fists, making his knuckles go white with pressure. He was suddenly aware of the multiple sets of eyes that was watching this situation with interest. Naruto, however, didn't have time to reflect on his fellow shinobi gathered in Training Ground 8, as Sasuke seemed to take Naruto falling into a taijutsu stance as a signal that he was ready to fight, which he was. Sasuke charged straight for Naruto, having roughly pushed Sakura to the ground. Sasuke arrived, swinging a punch right for Naruto's head, causing the blonde to have to quickly raise his hands to protect his masked face. He didn't have time to retaliate though, as Sasuke had used the momentum of his blocked punch to spin his body around and lash a kick out at Naruto, who despite blocking it, was sent sprawling to the ground. Naruto had landed with a thud and proceeded to skid several meters across the dry earth, feeling his skin graze beneath his clothes as he did so. Sasuke had landed gracefully with what looked to Naruto like a victorious smirk on his face. That damn smirk of superiority had been the same one he had seen during their genin exam when Sasuke had effortlessly gone through the requirements. Naruto heaved himself off the ground and back into a standing position, his arms stinging from where he had received that kick from Sasuke. Looking at the Uchiha, he saw that Sasuke was waiting for him to return to his feet before attacking. The action could be seen as comradely, but Naruto thought it was probably closer to cockiness. Sasuke wasted no time flashing through various hand seals once Naruto had gotten to his feet. Naruto watched as Sasuke's body seemed to pulse with the blood-red mist that Naruto had come to suspect as chakra, his eyes flicking down to Sasuke's hands. Snake, ram, monkey, boar, he was using that fireball technique he had seen so often. "Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu!" Sasuke bellowed, bringing his fingers up to his mouth and blowing gently, causing a huge ball of fire to ignite several feet away from Sasuke, and in the place where Naruto had been stood. Luckily Naruto was a few seconds ahead of Sasuke, already guessing the technique and was thus able to avoid the massive fireball. Naruto had leaped into the shrubland that sat along the wall of the training ground, taking cover among the bushes, much like Sasuke had done during the infamous bell test. He watched from his position in the bush as the giant fireball died down, leaving nothing but severely scalded earth. The fury written across Sasuke's face was almost comical. Apparently he hadn't expected him to escape. As Naruto watched Sasuke whirl around, looking for any sign of where he had hidden, a plan started to formulate in his head. It was risky, relying almost entirely on Sasuke thinking he was stupid. His fingers formed the familiar cross that was needed to create his clones. Naruto wasted no time and whispered Kagebushin no Jutsu. Suddenly, on either side of him 3 perfect clones appeared. Naruto was immediately assaulted by multiple points of view, all looking at the same thing from a few different angles. It was weird, like it had been back when he was fighting Kabuto, only now it was on a much larger scale as there was 6 clones. It'd have to be something he got used to. Maybe Jiraiya could help? Naruto nodded at both sets of clones in a signal that confirmed his and their readiness. Naruto along with 5 clones leapt from the safety of the bush, leaving one solitary clone behind. Each clutching a kunai in each of their hands, they launched them at Sasuke, deliberately aiming slightly off the Uchiha so that the kunai embedded in the ground around the boy. Naruto was assaulted by several visions of Sasuke's fist or foot attacking his numerous clones before he saw Sasuke's foot come thundering towards his stomach, winding him and sending him flying backwards into the stream with a splash. It was with some satisfaction that Naruto watched Sasuke cross the small piece of grassland towards the shrubland without checking to see if all the clones had dispelled. As Naruto hid in the water of the stream, he could see Sasuke's feet approaching thanks to the single clone he had left laying among the bushes. The clone looked up, seeing Sasuke's emotionless face staring down upon it, and offered a meek smile to the Sharingan-wielding boy. The clone watched as Sasuke flashed through the same hand seals he had done moments earlier before launching the increasingly bigger fireball at the poor clone and somersaulting back into the clearing, thinking he had grasped victory in this fight. Sasuke's back was turned, watching the flames that tore through the shrubland with a triumphant look on his face, clearly happy with himself. It was the same look of triumph that Sasuke had worn when he defeated Yoroi Akato in the Chunin exams. Climbing out of the stream, Naruto clambered up onto the bank to see Sasuke still watching the flames. Naruto's fellow genin were watching him intently as he pushed himself to his feet and began to run at his teammate. Naruto's jumpsuit was soaking wet, sticking to his body as he ran towards the figure of Sasuke. Sasuke turned suddenly, several kunai on his fingers ready to launch at Naruto, but he was too late. By the time he had turned around, Naruto was already flying through the air, his legs stretched out, the sole of his foot completely flat as he planted it squarely on Sasuke's chest, sending the Uchiha flying backwards, over the remaining flames from his jutsu and into the trunk of a burning tree. The tall figure of Naruto Shikamaru for once wasn't lazily reclining and watching the clouds roll by. Instead, he was watching intently of the battle between Naruto and Sasuke. He, like everybody else in the Rookie Nine, was pleasantly surprised with how well Uzumaki Naruto had done during the Chunin exams, even if he had done so in such an unusual style. Most genin had developed a decent repertoire of jutsu during the training under their Jounin sensei. God knows Asuma had spent a lot of time and effort making his own genin team into a well-functioning unit that might live up to everyone's expectations. Naruto, however, didn't seem to have done anything since graduating the academy. He still seemed to rely on the Kage Bushin and his sloppy taijutsu, whereas it appeared, at least to him, that Sasuke had progressed as one would expect from a Uchiha. Yet despite that, Sasuke had fallen for a brilliant plan by Naruto. The loudmouth who had done worse than he had during his academy years had tricked the prodigy. There was something bittersweet about that for Shikamaru. Maybe there was something more to the blonde genin than everybody had thought. Perhaps he wasn't the Hokage's charity case after all. Maybe Naruto did have promised to become a good shinobi even if his dad said the boy would always be a lost cause. That was another thing that didn't add up about Naruto. Everyone in Konoha seemed to hate the boy. Shikamaru couldn't remember anything that Naruto had done to deserve that type of hatred. Sure, he'd been annoying, but not to the point of hatred. Whoa, as impressed voice from beside him muttered, breaking Shikamaru out of his musing. The boy was rather plump, a packet of crisps in his hands as he watched the display between two of Team 7's genin, his hair sticking out of the strange hat that sat on his head. His blue eyes were wide as he watched Sasuke fly through the air and into the burning tree, clearly impressed. Choji had always been somewhat easier on Naruto than the majority of the other genin, probably because they had isolated Choji too and not let him join in their games just like they had Naruto. He emphasized with the blonde and had often stuck up for the boy whenever he was unfairly treated by their classmates, a trait that just about summed up Choji's loyalty. That was good, right, Shikamaru? The plump boy asked, looking at him for confirmation. Yeah, Shikamaru nodded in agreement, his eyes flicking back to the fight. I never had Naruto pegged as someone for strategy, but I guess even Naruto can think quickly when needed. Yeah. Choji enthused, guess Naruto really is a good shinobi, huh? Shikamaru nodded, thinking about the change that had occurred within Naruto since he had come back from finding the Godame. He had spent more time locked away in the archives than at Ichiraku's, which was highly unusual. Whatever had happened on that trip had changed Naruto, and that mask he was wearing, well, Shikamaru couldn't see how Sasuke could be healed in moments by the two medic ninja that had been brought back, but they couldn't cure whatever it was that had caused Naruto to don a ANBU-style mask. One thing's for sure, Shikamaru told Choji, something doesn't quite add up with Naruto. The figure of Uchiha Sasuke hit the tree with a crack, his head snapping back and bashing against the tree. Naruto saw Sasuke's eye narrow before he fell face first onto the charcoal-like ground. Naruto turned his back to Sasuke and began to walk towards the streets of Konoha, away from the training area. He was secretly pretty proud of himself. He just managed to outsmart the prodigy of Konoha, the boy many expected to have a bright future within the shinobi ranks of Konoha, whereas he was somebody who many had been against him even joining the ninja academy. And he'd done it by using his head. He hadn't charged in blindly screaming and shouting like he had contemplated, but instead, he'd used his strengths to overcome him. Maybe Jiraiya had been right. Maybe there was a time for charging in, and a time for thinking things through. We haven't finished. Naruto closed his eyes. He had hoped Sasuke would know that this fight was over. Sasuke must have gotten pretty badly burnt when he crashed into the burning tree, and he supposed it was a testament to Sasuke's strength that he was able to still challenge him to continue the fight. Naruto turned around and looked at Sasuke. His clothes were burned, revealing some of his chest, pink from the heat of the burning tree. The crimson-red liquid of blood cascading down his chest, the same crimson-red liquid that his hair seemed to be matted with. The insane look in his eyes was, however, still present. A pang of guilt hit Naruto. He hadn't intended to cause that much damage to Sasuke when he had delivered the kick, but the guilt quickly subsided as he remembered Sasuke launching 2 of those giant fireballs at him. "You can't beat me that easily," Sasuke roared as he clambered through the burning remains of the small piece of forest into the clearing again. Naruto could see dismay on the faces of Ino and Sakura as Sasuke arrived in the clearing. "Sasuke," Naruto asked him quietly, "what are you doing?" Proving Sasuke's breasts were ragged and he was blinking strangely. "Proving I'm stronger than you, better than you. To prove you're nothing but a poor ninja who got through the academy by luck." Naruto got the distinct impression that wasn't what Sasuke had intended to say, that he had amended what he was originally going to say to something else, something more personal. "I'm done, Sasuke," Naruto told him. "I don't have anything to prove." "Yes you do," Sasuke snapped, his lips forming a vicious smirk. "Even if you could finish me off, you couldn't, just like you couldn't with Haku." Naruto winced as if stung by a bee. He had no idea how Sasuke had known about his inability to fulfill Haku's wishes, but he had a good guess, throwing a look at Sakura, and had he not been wearing his mask she would have seen an incredibly hurt look, though she seemed to get the message as she recoiled under his gaze. "I'm done, Sasuke," Naruto repeated coldly. "I'm not going to get involved in your petty attempts to live up to your brother." "Don't you dare!" Sasuke screamed accusingly, before regaining his composure and finishing, "Don't you dare talk about him. You know nothing." "I know everything," Naruto growled angrily. "I know you're so desperate to catch up to your brother, you're willing to do anything and get there by any means. So desperate for revenge, that you think about nothing else. But I know something you haven't realized yet. You're not as ruthless as Itachi, you don't have the hate." Naruto watched Sasuke's eyes widen before they narrowed dangerously. Apparently he had struck a nerve. "You know nothing," Naruto answered with a shrug. He knew he was right. He knew exactly how Sasuke was feeling. Well, not exactly, but he knew about how revenge made you act differently. When he was younger, he remembered wanting to have revenge against the people who treated him badly. Sometimes it scared him to remember how closely to becoming like Gaara he had come, but he'd found something other than revenge: friends. Naruto supposed this was the difference between himself and Sasuke. He had craved friends, and when he made them, he had quickly lost his resentment he had felt to those who had treated him badly. But Sasuke, who so many people wanted to be friends with, had shunned everyone and thrived in the hate he had for his brother. As Naruto turned once, intent on going back to his apartment to read over the books he had managed to take out of the archives, he felt the same crackling in the air as he had in the Chunin exam. Sasuke couldn't possibly be doing what he thought he was, could he? Turning quickly, he saw Sasuke gripping his right hand with his left. Bright white light, not dissimilar to that which had gathered around Tsunade's, started to form around Sasuke before the luminous white chakra of lightning began to gather in Sasuke's hand. Naruto knew he had to act quickly, and crossing his fingers in the familiar hand seal for the Kagebushin, a perfect replica of Naruto appearing beside him. It was obvious to one set of eyes that Sasuke was nearly finished charging his Chidori, let alone 2. Naruto stuck his hand out and began to gather as much chakra as possible whilst the clone worked as quickly as possible. Naruto kept his eye off Sasuke whilst watching through his strange link to his clone how the Rasengan was coming along. Sasuke's Chidori was finished charging quicker than Naruto had been able to make his Rasengan, and it was with some fear that he watched Sasuke come rushing forward, the dirt from the ground flying into the air as he did so. "Chidori!" Sasuke roared, his eyes wide, the 2 tomo of the Sharingan becoming apparent to Naruto, whose clone dispelled, leaving Naruto with a fully formed Rasengan in his hand. "Rasengan!" Naruto roared from behind his mask, swinging his arm out to strike, hoping that he would be able to strike Sasuke before he could hit the Chidori on him. Both shinobi came within millimeters of striking each other when an unfamiliar voice shouted over the both of their roars. "Futon de Tapa." A large, almost hurricane-like wind erupted within Training Ground 8 with enough force to fling the bodies of Naruto and Sasuke from their impending clash and into the large wall, where the shrub land had previously been, that separated Training Ground 8 from Training Ground 9. The blast of wind may have been able to stop the two shinobi striking each other, but it hadn't stopped the wall receiving the brunt of both jutsu. The Chidori and Rinnegan both hit the wall, causing a small explosion to erupt, sending chunks of rubble all over the training ground. Naruto wandered through the dust that had filtered across the ground thanks to the small explosion, coughing and covered head to toe in dust, but otherwise seemingly okay. As Naruto came out of the dust, managing to blink away the remnants of soot that had filtered through the mask, he saw exactly who was responsible for ending his and Sasuke's disagreement. There in the middle of the clearing, standing in front of the rest of the Rookie 9, stood Sarutobi Asuma. His cigarette hung limply from his mouth, his hands were still in the seal for the jutsu he just used, and a look of absolute fury was on his face. What the hell is going on here? Naruto had rarely seen Team 10's Jonin-sensei, but whenever he'd seemed very similar to Shikamaru. Sarutobi Asuma had always seemed fairly laid back, not willing to let anything faze him. He'd always seemed so calm and collected. But that wasn't the Asuma who stood in front of him at the moment. The man in front of him was flushed with an anger that Naruto hadn't had directed at him in months. Naruto tried several times to offer an explanation for what had just happened, but nothing he could think of seemed to be able to justify what the bearded man had just broken up. Naruto knew he was well and truly in the shit. He'd been caught using an A-rank technique on a fellow shinobi of Konoha, his teammate no less, and while Sasuke had been in the same situation, he somehow doubted that the Uchiha heir would be in the same amount of trouble he would no doubt be in. Naruto was momentarily distracted by the figure of Uchiha Sasuke stumbling out from the rubble looking much worse than he did. Despite being, like Naruto, covered from head to toe in soot, the crimson-red blood that drained from the wounds which Naruto had inflicted upon his teammate was still evident, staining the soot a bloody red. Naruto had to admit Sasuke looked a lot worse than he did. As he tried stumbling towards the group, he fell to a knee a couple of times, clearly struggling to stand, the injury to the back of his head no doubt being the source of Sasuke's pain. Sasuke, Asuma barked, "You need to go to the hospital." "I'm fine," Sasuke growled, coming ever closer to Naruto. "I don't need your help." Sasuke's point would have been much more convincing had he not again stumbled and nearly fallen down. Naruto watched Asuma give Shikamaru a sideward glance and nod of the head. Shikamaru seemed to understand, probably due to the closeness that the two shared, and brought his hand into one solitary hand seal, the seal of the rat. The shadow beneath Shikamaru zoomed forward just like it had during the Chunin exams and joined with Sasuke's shadow. Sasuke stilled instantly, a look of anger ignited in his eyes as he realized what had happened. "I'll take him to the hospital, Asuma-sensei," Shikamaru offered before walking calmly away from the group like he had witnessed nothing out of the ordinary. His shadow still connected to Sasuke's, and Sasuke was forced to mirror Shikamaru's every move, the look of defiance still present in his eyes, as Shikamaru marched him out of the training ground. "Thank you, Shikamaru." Asuma nodded in acknowledgement to his student. Naruto now shifted uncomfortably as the gaze of Team 10's Jonin instructor turned upon him. He was now well aware he was the only one suffering Asuma's anger, and if it was anything like his father's had been, Naruto shuddered, the thought of the one time he had managed to anger the Sandaime still present in his mind. This wasn't particularly a foreign situation for Naruto. When he had been younger, and had been one of the more mischievous villagers, he had been caught numerous times by the village's shinobi, and each time he'd been caught it had led to a hefty bout of anger on those shinobi parts. It wasn't anything new to Naruto. "You," Asuma growled in a manner that reminded Naruto of a dog, "follow me, we're going to see the Hokage." Naruto nodded quickly, eager not to anger Sarutobi Asuma any more than he already had. The bearded man began to walk out of the training ground, causily rummaging through his pockets, no doubt looking for his lighter, with Naruto a healthy few paces behind. It was quite embarrassing, to be honest, to be frog-marched by a man who he had only ever really spoken to a handful of times and didn't really know. To make things worse, it had happened in front of the entire Rookie 9 as well as 2 members of Team Guy. Naruto couldn't help but remind himself that he had always tried to prove himself to be the strongest, and yet here he was getting frog-marched to the Hokage's office like some sort of criminal. "I can't believe it," Asuma muttered under his breath. "What is Kakashi teaching these kids? What type of team fights amongst itself?" Naruto wasn't really sure he was supposed to overhear Asuma's muttering, though it wasn't like he could do anything about it. He had learned a long time ago that talking to people when they were angry often resulted in the anger being directed at him, which in this instance was not exactly something he wanted to happen. It was bad enough he'd no doubt get a tongue lashing from Tsunade. He didn't want to risk getting one from the normally calm and laid-back Asuma. "I'll be having words with Tsunadeheim about Kakashi's team," Asuma grumbled, still walking through the village at a brisk pace towards the Hokage mansion, Naruto having spent more time in that mansion in front of the Sandaime Hokage, Asuma's father, than he cared to count. It seemed that the same trend was happening with the Godame. She was barely 2 days into her term as Hokage, and he was already being dragged off to see her. He had wondered over the last 2 days what type of Hokage Tsunade would turn out to be. She certainly didn't seem to be like the old man. Well, she hadn't when they had brought her back to the village. She was rude and aggressive and didn't listen very well. In fact, she was everything that Naruto thought would make a bad Hokage wrapped up into one-hinged women. Though Naruto supposed it could be possible that the responsibility of being Hokage could straighten her out. Maybe Tsunade would be a good Hokage, though he thought it was a long shot. He'd seen the way she had acted in that little town where he and Jiraiya had tracked her down to, drinking insane amounts of sake and gambling away what Jiraiya had called her family fortune. Naruto looked up and saw that they had arrived at the Hokage mansion. The carved faces of the past Hokages were forever immortalized in the cliff face to the side of the impressive mansion. The mansion itself was impressive, putting all other houses in Konoha to shame, though Naruto knew from personal experience the mansion itself only had 1 floor of living space, making the mansion more of an apartment than anything else. The first floor of the mansion was the reception, where people booking appointments to see the Hokage went, and then there was the next floor, which was the Hokage offices, a corridor filled with various rooms filled with forbidden jutsu scrolls and other artifacts Naruto had never quite gotten access to. Then Naruto guessed that the 3rd floor would be the residential area for the Hokage. "Good morning," the receptionist, behind a small desk as Naruto followed Asuma through the doors and into the reception, called in the annoying patronizing voice that all receptionists seem to use. "How may I help you today?" "I need to speak with the Hokage, please," Asuma requested. Naruto let a sigh of relief go that he didn't know he had been holding. It seemed that Asuma had calmed down, as his voice didn't hold any of the anger that it had in the training ground. "Do you have an appointment?" the woman asked, typing on her computer. A slight frown appeared on her forehead. "Well, no," Asuma replied slightly sheepishly, "it's a matter of disciplinary." There was. Naruto was now officially in the shit. He wasn't stupid, he'd read the rules. Sparring with a teammate was allowed, even encouraged, but the moment you overstepped the line from sparring to fighting, it was an extremely important matter. Somehow he didn't imagine he could pretend that both he and Sasuke were sparring when they had been caught by a jounin using 2 A-ranks techniques. "I see," the woman cast a look at Naruto of utter disdain before looking back at Asuma. "I understand. That thing spends more time here than the Hokage does." Naruto's head hung. He was well aware that whilst the shinobi opinion of him was slowly changing and he was slowly but surely gaining respect as a decent ninja, but among the civilians it wasn't hard to see that the resentment of him was still as present as ever. "Can I see Tsunade then?" Asuma asked with a slight edge developing in his voice. "Oh yes, of course," the middle-aged woman bumbled as she once again started typing on her computer. "If I may take your name, please, sir?" "Sarutobi Asuma." Asuma replied at once. The woman momentarily stopped typing and looked at the man with what Naruto could only assume was pity. "Oh, you poor man," the woman cooed. "Your father was a wonderful man and is sorely missed." To Naruto, Asuma looked incredibly awkward, like he didn't quite know how to respond to the mention of his father. He stroked his beard and took a puff of his cigarette, careful to direct the smoke away from the women behind the counter. A soft smile graced his lips but didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you," Asuma replied to the women. "I'm sure he died the way he wished, protecting the village." "Of course," the woman replied respectfully with a bow of her head. "Come on, Naruto," Asuma ordered as he set off for his father's former office. It only really started to occur to Naruto that Asuma probably had a better knowledge of this building than anybody still alive. He had most likely grown up in this building. Naruto followed Asuma up the staircase, towards what he assumed would be Tsunade's office. Naruto mentally prepared himself for what he was sure would be a verbal beating from the Godame. As the 2 Konoha shinobi got closer to the door which Naruto knew to hold the Hokage's office, having snuck into it many times during his days in the academy, the dim sound of voices could be heard through the impressive oak door, which had been shut. Asuma knocked loudly on the door and the voices went quiet. There was a moment of silence as Naruto and Asuma waited anxiously for the door to be answered. When the door was opened, it wasn't by Tsunade or even Shizen, it was instead being the white-haired, tattooed face of Jiraiya that poked around the door as it opened. "Asuma, just the man I wanted to see," Jiraiya asked with a friendly smile. "What can I do for you?" Asuma replied, casting a quick look at Naruto. "Well, it wasn't actually you I came to see. Is Tsunade here?" Jiraiya's head disappeared behind the door away from view for a moment before the door opened, revealing the office. Jiraiya now stood beside a desk that was piled high with paper. In between the piles of paper sat the extremely bored-looking Tsunade. her head resting in the palm of her hand, her body slouched, and she looked like she would rather be anywhere but cooped up in this office. Tsunade-sama. Asuma greeted with a slight bow of his head. What can I do for you, Asuma? The blonde woman asked, lifting her head out of her hands and folding them underneath her bust. Asuma's eyes snapped over to where Jiraiya was sat casually reading the document that sat at the top of the extremely large pile to the right of Tsunade. Don't worry about Jiraiya, Tsunade informed Asuma offhandedly. He might as well stay, he'd only find out what happened here anyway. Jiraiya seemed to take what Tsunade had said as a compliment, but Naruto thought she meant it as anything but. Though that didn't seem to bother the white-haired man, then again this was the man who took the word pervert as the ultimate compliment. I had arranged to meet my genin team at Training Ground 6 to work on their taijutsu, Asuma explained as I was on my way. However, I got distracted by a large commotion coming from Training Ground 8. I decided to check in on it, and arrived just in time to see Uchiha Sasuke charging at Uzumaki Naruto with the Chidori. At that moment Naruto saw both Sannin's eyes lock on him. Jiraiya seemed slightly more alarmed than Tsunade did. Perhaps she wasn't familiar with the Chidori technique. It didn't seem like a technique that many people were aware of, as Naruto recalled that only Madogai had known of it when Sasuke revealed it during the Chunin exams. Uzumaki then retaliated with the Yandame's Rinnegan. This announcement from Asuma had drawn a gasp from Tsunade and a slightly proud look on the face of Jiraiya. Injuries? Tsunade asked curiously. Thankfully they were minimal, Asuma replied. Sasuke suffered more than Naruto did. It would have been much worse had I not intervened and managed to divert each of them away from the other. Though I am afraid the wall dividing Training Grounds 8 and 9 will need repairing. Explain yourself, Naruto, Tsunade ordered, and it had better be good. Naruto knew that there wasn't any way he could explain himself. He had allowed Sasuke to bait him into a fight which had quickly escalated into both shinobi using extremely dangerous techniques. There was no way to get himself out of this, he would just have to accept the punishment. There isn't much to explain, Naruto informed his Hokage with a shrug. Me and Sasuke had a disagreement, and well. It was strictly true, but it was better than saying that Sasuke had just been looking for a fight, and he had stupidly given Sasuke exactly what he wanted. He's your teammate, Tsunade exclaimed. The entire reason that genin are placed on a team of 3 is to teach them the value of teamwork. You're not supposed to try and kill your teammates. The last part had come out as a hiss, and her eyes were staring at him incredulously like she couldn't believe what Asuma had told her. In fairness, Tsunade-sama, Asuma argued before Naruto had chance. Naruto only used his Rinnegan when he saw Sasuke charging the Chidori. It was more self-defense than anything. Naruto shot what he hoped was a thankful glance towards Asuma, who, if he saw it, didn't acknowledge it. Naruto could hardly believe a man who he had barely said 5 words to had openly defended him against the prestigious Uchiha, and whilst what he had said was the truth, Naruto had lived in Konoha long enough to know that the truth wasn't always spoken when it concerned him. This announcement from the Sandame's son had apparently caused Tsunade to lose some of her anger, as she sank back into her chair and looked at both Naruto and Asuma. So where is Uchiha Sasuke? Tsunade asked with a tilt of her head. Nara Shikamaru has taken him to the hospital, Asuma replied immediately. Tsunade turned her attention once again back to Naruto and raised an eyebrow at him and asked in a voice which contained a mixture of anger and mild disbelief. You injured him enough to warrant sending him to hospital? Naruto looked sheepish, scratching the back of his head, causing several strands of blonde hair to fall forward over his white mask, momentarily obscuring the painted leaf insignia on the forehead of the mask. I didn't mean to, Naruto exclaimed. We were fighting and well, I tricked him with my clones and sort of kicked him into a tree. I see, Tsunade replied with pursed lips. You should just be grateful that neither of you were seriously hurt. Nevertheless, it is still incredibly irresponsible, and as such you will be on D-rank missions for the next month. What? Naruto exclaimed. You heard me. You've demonstrated a complete and utter lack of respect for your teammate, even endangering his life. You're lucky I am not sending you back to the academy. But I only used the Rinnegan in defense, Naruto protested, repeating the words which Asuma had used in defense of him just minutes earlier. You were still fighting before that, Tsunade told him, and not just a friendly spar. Tsunade quickly told him, seeing that he was ready to protest. But I didn't go looking for the fight. Sasuke goaded me. Naruto exclaimed, still protesting against the D-rank mission punishment. He'd rather do anything than D-rank missions. If he had to go back to chasing lost cats and painting fences now, he'd go insane. And you responded. Tsunade pointed out, you were as much a part of that fight as Sasuke was. Well, I don't see Sasuke here, Naruto argued, crossing his arms. That's because you put him in hospital. Tsunade growled, and beneath his mask Naruto blushed. And don't worry, after this meeting I am going to go and speak with Sasuke and hand him the same punishment. Naruto was slightly relieved that he was at least being treated on an even foot with Sasuke. If he was going to be doing D-rank missions for a month, then Sasuke should be doing them for at least 2 months, seeing as he was the one who tried to hit him with the Chidori. Now I expect you to report here tomorrow morning for your first D-rank, Tsunade ordered. Naruto nodded sharply and made a quick retreat from the office. Asuma began to follow him out, apparently thinking that his job had been done and that the punishment had been handed out. Actually, Asuma, the deep voice of Jiraiya called out as the 2 Konoha shinobi were close to opening the door. Could you stay behind? We would like to discuss something with you. Asuma looked at both Sannin carefully for a moment before nodding and stepping back into the room, in a few short strides managing to be back standing in front of Tsunade's desk like he had been just moments before. You may leave, Naruto, Tsunade told him. Naruto didn't need to be told twice. There was a bowl of ramen at his apartment with his name on it. Opening the door and stepping outside of Tsunade's office, he left the door to swing itself shut. As it did, he caught the beginning of the Sannin and Asuma's conversation. Now, Asuma, the unmistaken voice of Jiraiya asked, are you still in touch with the 12? The door to the Hokage's office shut with a soft click of the latch, the conversation ending and being replaced with nothing but soft murmurs. Naruto's curiosity was piqued about what could possibly be being talked about between 2 Sannin and the Sandaime Hokage's eldest son, but even he was not brave, or stupid, enough to try and listen in on a conversation between 2 Sannin. And beside, he was hungry and there was a bowl of ramen just waiting to be eaten at his apartment. The Uchiha clan district was the largest of all the clan districts in Konohagakure no Sato, and was best described as a small town. Near on 100 decently sized houses that all sat long since abandoned, the roads that led between the houses were empty. If anybody had been walking past the entrance to the district, they would have thought it empty, abandoned and completely uninhabitable. However, they would be wrong. Deep in the heart of the Uchiha clan district there was a house, not much different from the rest of the houses that made up the district, where a single light shone into the otherwise dark section of Konoha. Uchiha Sasuke was to everybody's knowledge the last Uchiha in Konoha, the only surviving Uchiha from the once great clan that had been tragically slaughtered at the hands of their own prodigy. When it had happened, everyone had been so considerate towards him, so quick to offer him kind words and a comforting ear, but he needed none of their pity. The third Hokage had offered him various apartments, trying to tempt him away from the place he had called home for so many years. The third had often come to visit him to make sure that he was coping. Sasuke didn't know why or particularly care. He guessed that the Sandaime was worried about the effects living in the house that he had witnessed his parents so brutally murdered and would have on him. He needn't have worried. Nothing had changed. In fact, living in that house, his house, had done more for him than any teacher at the academy. This house had helped create the hate that he would one day be able to use to redeem his clan, to one day kill his brother and avenge his family's death. This house had caused his sadness to turn into his most powerful weapon. Everywhere he looked when he was in his house he saw them. Their smiling faces, the look on his mum's face when he'd arrive home from his friends' houses, the look on his dad's face as he'd spot him playing ninja with the other clan's children. Sometimes he thought he could even hear their voices. This house served a reminder for everything he had had taken from him, ripped from his hands by his own flesh and blood, everything he sought revenge for. Yet, the hate he felt wasn't enough, the power he had wasn't enough. He didn't hold a candle to Itachi. By his age, Itachi had become a NBU captain, and here he was still stuck on a genin team of rejects. He had the dead last and a kunoichi who didn't know one end of a kunai from the other. How was he supposed to get powerful enough to kill his brother with such no-hopers around him? But even those no-hopers, or perhaps just the dead last, had shown glimpses of something that truly terrified him. Uzumaki Naruto, a boy who had barely managed to graduate the academy, had proved himself to be a powerful adversary. There was a power in Naruto that nobody seemed to be able to explain, or more importantly is willing to explain what this power was. He'd had glimpses of it when they had hunted down Sabaku no Gaara. How had somebody as unremarkable as Uzumaki Naruto been able to beat the monster that Gaara had transformed into? How had Naruto been able to summon a summon the size of which he had? Sasuke had considered it a fluke at the time. It had been well documented in his clan that even average shinobi were capable of pulling of remarkable feats when under enough stress, but now that option seemed less likely. The fight he had challenged Uzumaki Naruto to had opened his eyes. He had been beaten by the dead last. The dead last had somehow managed to trick him and capitalized on it. How had he been able to pull off such a move against him? Every sparring session they had had since being placed on the same team had resulted in his victory. It was almost like Naruto's fighting style had changed since coming back from collecting the Godame. How could he expect to beat Itachi if he couldn't even beat Naruto? He had to become stronger. He had to know jutsu that could kill Itachi. His giant fireball hadn't even been able to scold Naruto's hideous orange jumpsuit. How could he expect to hit Itachi with it? Kakashi had proved hesitant to teach him any significant jutsu. He'd only relented to teach him the Chidori because of the threat that Gaara posed. He would never reach the level of power he needed under the tutoring of Kakashi. He'd never progress whilst being held back by poor shinobi like Naruto and Sakura. He needed to get stronger. Well, if it isn't Larry Loner. Sasuke whipped around, dropping his chopsticks onto the wooden table with a mild clatter, standing abruptly appending his seat and locking eyes with the intruder in his house. The intruder stood boldly in the doorframe of the kitchen. He was tall with limp grayish hair framing a pale face with strangely dark lips, a beaded necklace hanging around his slender neck and odd purple rope tied around his waist. "Who are you?" Sasuke demanded, falling into a fighting stance. "That would be very stupid of you," the figure chuckled, nodding at Sasuke's fighting stance before glancing over Sasuke's shoulder. The last Uchiha glanced quickly over his shoulder to see a red-headed girl wearing a bandana, a defiant look in her brown eyes as she crouched on his windowsill. The gray-haired figure then glanced to his right, near the door which led to the staircase, revealing a large red mohawked man, a thick large purple rope tied in a bow around his back. Even Sasuke had to admit he looked intimidating. It was then Sasuke noticed that the gray-haired line of sight had shifted again, this time to directly above him. There on the ceiling was a tanned young man with 4 arms and a black ponytail which hung towards the table. As he effortlessly hung from the ceiling, the young boy gave him a mocking smile. "What do you want?" Sasuke asked, knowing full well he was surrounded. He wasn't Naruto. He wasn't stupid enough to attack the young man who stood in front of him whilst his 3 cronies surrounded him. "That's simple," the figure in the doorway replied. "We're here to collect you." "Collect me?" "Yes," a smile adorned the dark lips of the figure. "We're here to take you to Orochimaru." "Oh," Sasuke growled, "and what makes you think I'll go with you?" "Because you want power," the young man whispered, "and Orochimaru-sama can give you the power you crave." Sasuke's eyes went wide. This was an offer. They wanted him to go with them to train under a Sannin. To train under one of the most powerful shinobi in the world, a shinobi who made Kakashi look like a genin. "That seal on your neck," the girl behind him said, causing Sasuke to again glance over his shoulder, "is the key. It will unlock all your potential which will be lost if you don't come with us. You won't amount to anything in this shitty village." "She's right," the pale figure in the doorway agreed. "The hidden villages keep shinobi weak, telling them which jutsu they can and can't learn, forbidding them from using techniques of true power. Orochimaru-sama is unlike any other Kage. He encourages you to learn such techniques, rewards you for mastering deadly techniques any other village would exile you for. He is the only way you'll get power." Was it true? Was it possible? Could Orochimaru possibly give him the power he so desperately needed to succeed, or was that a lie? Maybe he could gain the power they spoke of here. His mind cut to the technique that Naruto had used. He'd seen the destruction that little sphere of swirling chakra had done to the wall, blasting right through it where his Chidori had only made a dent in it. If Naruto was gaining power, then surely he could, but then again this was Naruto, and there was something about him that not even he could put his finger on. "Come with us," the figure urged. "We'll free you from the shackles that keep you weak. You'll be a match for your brother before you know it." Sasuke turned shocked eyes back upon the figure, who smirked at the look of shock that was written across Sasuke's face. "Oh yes, Orochimaru-sama has told us all about the great Uchiha Itachi," the boy remarked, "about how strong he is. About how he was the pride of your clan, about how nobody but he could match the power of the Mangekyo's Sharingan." How they knew this information he didn't know. It was too much of a coincidence to not be true. To know of his clan's ultimate technique took intimate knowledge of the person. To know Itachi possessed the Mangekyo Sharingan meant that Orochimaru knew Itachi. "I'll come," Sasuke decided. "Thought you would," the figure smirked. "Orochimaru said you wouldn't be able to resist the call of true power." Sasuke nodded, dropping his fighting stance and giving his kitchen one last look. He was about to take his first step to truly avenging his family's death. Itachi's blood would stain his hands if it was the last thing he did. 8:15. Who the hell was knocking at his door at 8:15 in the morning? Though knocking may have been pushing it, the knock was so soft at first, Naruto had thought he had been imagining it. He'd barely been up 20 minutes, and was only awake because he knew Tsunade would likely murder him if he reported late for his punishment. Still wearing nothing but his pajama bottoms and a slightly frayed vest-styled shirt, Naruto trudged over from the small chair he had placed against his counter, which served as both his dining area and kitchen, leaving a half-eaten bowl of ramen stewing on the side. His old Hittite still maintaining pride of place on the counter, having not worn it since Jiraiya had given him that mask. He had thought about wearing it somewhere else on his body like he had seen the other genin do, but none of the places he had tried had felt right. It just wasn't the same. Walking towards the door, Naruto grabbed the mask that had been placed on a rusty hook which had originally been designed to hold a coat and placed it on his face. It was surprising how quickly he had become accustomed to wearing the mask. It was almost routine for him now. Making sure that the mask was in place, he swiftly turned the keys that sat into lock and twisted the door's battered handle, yanking the door open, ready to ask just why they felt the need to knock at such an ungodly hour. The point that he was up anyway was mute. Who willingly came out at this time of the morning? Only when he opened the door there was nobody there. He was positive he hadn't been imagining the knocking. Perhaps it was the classic shinobi game of Knock Knock Ninja that seemed so popular amongst the academy students. He was about to turn around grumbling about shinobi wannabes when he caught a flash of purple hair poking out from behind the corner. If there was one thing he hated about young academy students who played Knock Knock Ninja, it was the academy students who stayed around afterwards to watch their victims. Deciding that this little punk wouldn't get away with it, Naruto walked quickly along the corridor that led to his block of apartments to where he had seen the brazen young shinobi in training loitering. He'd teach them to knock on people's doors and run. Naruto would never have dreamed of doing something so stupid when he was younger. When he played Knock Knock Ninja, he never stuck around to watch. That was just plain stupid, a rookie mistake, especially when concerning Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto jumped around the corner, putting on his most deranged-looking face and slamming his hands on either side of the student's head, allowing no escape. Only when he did so he didn't come face to face with a young academy student, he came face to face with the featureless white eyes of Hyuga Hinata. Hinata let a high-pitched squeak escape and backed up into the wall of the corridor, looking extremely alarmed at Naruto's sudden presence, and scared to death. Why Hinata was playing Knock Knock Ninja he didn't know. She had never really been one to be involved in such games in the academy. Perhaps she was making up for lost time. Hinata? Naruto asked with a tilting of his head, why are you playing Knock Knock Ninja? Aren't we a little old for that? She looked absolutely mortified at the implication and blushed a furious red as Naruto lowered his arms to his side and simply gazed at her, waiting for an answer to why she had been knocking on his door at a time when most of Konoha was still tucked up in the warmth of their beds. I am well, Hinata stuttered. It seemed that Inuzuka Kiba hadn't rubbed off on Hinata and she was still as shy as she had been during the academy. Naruto remembered her offering to help him during the first part of the Chunin exam. He had been almost sure that one of the Chunin who were watching would spot them talking and had been relieved when they hadn't. You know you're not very good at this game, Naruto replied thoughtfully, to which Hinata lowered her head, her eyes gazing at the grubby corridor floor. You shouldn't hang around when playing Knock Knock Ninja. People get really annoyed when you play that game. No, but I wasn't, Hinata managed to stutter, still looking at the floor. You weren't? Naruto repeated. Then what were you doing? It was you who was knocking on my door, right? Hinata gave the barest of nods. I just wanted to talk to you. She had said in a tone barely above a whisper, and Naruto had to strain to hear it. He couldn't imagine being so shy. It was almost painful to see how shy Hinata was. Then talk away, Hinata-chan. Her blush, which had been reducing, returned full force, and she pushed her forefingers together in the gesture that he had long since come to associate with the young Hyuga. She paused and took a deep breath, like she was trying to regain her composure. I just wanted to talk about your eyes, she exclaimed in a rush. Naruto studied her for a moment. She had said it in such a rush, and so quickly that he had to take a moment to decipher what it was that she had said. He knew why she wanted to talk about his eyes, and he knew how she knew about his eyes when there should only be 3 other people in the whole of Konoha who knew his secret. Though he was now very aware that he lived in a village with an entire clan of people who could see through solid objects, and evidently could see through his mask, though he didn't know why, but he had thought that the seals that Erosenin had placed on it would not allow the Hyuga to see his face. Apparently, though, the similarities between his mask and the Umbu masks ended at the style and seals to hold them in place. He did wonder why Jiraiya wouldn't have placed those seals on the mask. He knew about the Hyuga. Perhaps he didn't know how to do it? Hinata. Naruto started but quickly trailed off as he heard the sound of footsteps echoing through the corridor. He turned his head towards the sound of the footsteps. It wasn't long before the source of them appeared. The tall figure of Naruto Shikamaru came running into view. Shikamaru looked like he had ran all the way from his family compound, which Naruto thought was highly unusual. He had never seen Shikamaru run anywhere. His hair was slightly wind-swept and his clothes tousled. The Chunin jacket he had received for his showing in the Chunin exam slightly skewed, and the fact he was up so early made Naruto think something was seriously wrong. Shikamaru was well documented for liking a leisurely lay in the mornings, something Naruto had heard Ino scold him for numerous occasions. Naruto, Shikamaru called, the Hokage needs to speak with you, it's urgent. I'm not supposed to be there for another 45 minutes. Naruto whined as he turned to face Shikamaru, who came to a gentle stop a couple of meters in front of him. No, it's Sasuke, Shikamaru told Naruto, who instantly frowned at the name of his teammate. He's gone. Naruto left the village. What? Come on, Shikamaru ushered. We've got to go speak with Tsunade-sama. But I'm not dressed, Naruto argued, looking down at his shabby pajamas, a fact that made Hinata flush a bright red for the third time and slump against the wall, her breathing becoming increasingly shallow. Do you think the Godame will care? Come on, Shikamaru told Naruto in a hurried fashion. Naruto decided he didn't like pushy Shikamaru and much preferred the lazy, sleepy Shikamaru he was used to. Let me just lock my door, Naruto yelled over his shoulder as he bounced down the corridor towards his apartment door, and slamming it shut and locking it with a single key before running back towards Shikamaru, only not waiting for the dark-haired boy to start running, instead running straight past him, leaving Shikamaru standing next to Hinata with a blank expression on his face as Naruto dashed down the corridor yelling over his shoulder. We'll talk about it later, Hinata. Just don't say anything, okay? Then the figure of Uzumaki Naruto disappeared down a set of stairs, leaving Shikamaru to chase him. Hyuga Hinata leant against the wall, recovering from what was her longest conversation with Naruto to date. That boy, Shikamaru sighed, is unbelievably troublesome. You wanted to see me, Tsunade-sama? The tall, bulky figure of Sarutobi Asuma asked as, for the second time in 2 days, he found himself standing in front of the Hokage's desk. I'm glad you came so early, Asuma, Tsunade replied with a grateful nod of her head. I didn't have much choice, Asuma replied sheepishly. Kurenai would have killed me had I not gone with Jiraiya. Maybe you shouldn't send Jiraiya to people's houses. Kurenai didn't kill him, did she? Tsunade asked with a sigh. He may be a perverted old lech, but he does have his uses. Why, Tsunade-chan? The unmistakable voice of Jiraiya called from the windowsill where the legendary Sannin had emerged, looking quite pleased that Tsunade was talking about him. You've finally come to your senses and seen what women all over Konoha have been saying for years. You need some of Jiraiya. Asuma shifted uncomfortably. While Tsunade visibly looked like a woman in her mid-20s, everyone knew she was over 50, as was Jiraiya, and to see the man who had looked after him on many occasions during his childhood, whilst his father was busy with his Hokage duties, put the moves on to Tsunade was some he'd rather not see. When did you say you were leaving the village? Tsunade asked curiously. Harsh, Tsunade, harsh. Jiraiya whined before perking up and looking at Asuma and giving the man a wink and saying, You got yourself a keeper in that girl, Asuma. Asuma felt his cheeks begin to heat up as Jiraiya talked about Kurenai in such a manner. It seemed no matter how much the two of them tried to keep their relationship a secret, people seemed to know about it. Of course, Jiraiya had caught Kurenai making a cup of coffee at 10 to 8 in the morning, so there wasn't much of a defense that could be made. He just hoped none of the genin would find out. He dreaded to think what Yamanaka Ino would do with that information. Thank you, Jiraiya-sama, Asuma replied quietly, keen not to have his father's former student talking about Kurenai like he was sure the Toad Sannin was thinking. I'm afraid we called you here for more serious business than your relationship with Kurenai, Tsunade informed the two men. Our discussion yesterday, have you given it any thought? I've thought of nothing else, Tsunade-heim, Asuma told the Hokage honestly. Your thoughts? Tsunade asked curiously. Jiraiya had stayed near the window, leaning casually against the wall and watching the exchange with interest. I'm not quite sure that you expect me to say, Asuma replied. Would you be willing? You're the only person who has access to them, Tsunade informed him. You're about 10 years too late, Asuma replied dully. The shinobi I served with are dead. There was a moment of silence as Asuma's revelation hung in the air, either Sannin saying anything and he himself just stood there waiting for one of his father's students to make the next move. But the organization is still alive, Tsunade stated simply. It is, Asuma agreed, but my affiliation with them ended 10 years ago. You were a member of the 12 Guardian Ninja, Asuma, Tsunade replied. You still have direct ties to the daimyo, no matter how much you pretend you don't. Why the sudden interest in the 12 Guardians? Asuma asked, slightly bristled by Tsunade's bluntness. The 12 operate under the direct control of the daimyo. With all due respect, Tsunade-heim, you do not have much say in what happens with them. I know that, Tsunade replied tartly, but you are the sole survivor of the original elite force. You must have some stroke with the daimyo. The daimyo is who he is, Asuma replied, thinking about the grouchy old man whom he and the other 11 had protected with their lives. He doubted that the daimyo would do whatever it was that Tsunade wanted. He will do what he wants and nobody, not even the Hokage, will be able to get any favor from him. I am well aware of the policy our daimyo has implemented with Konoha, Tsunade retorted. I was however not thinking of me. If I remember right and the reports I have read are correct, the daimyo owes you a great debt. Asuma felt his mouth go slack and hang open. What had happened all those years ago was supposed to have stayed a secret between himself and his father, but apparently once again his old man had chosen his duties as Hokage over his duties as a father. Tsunade was correct. He supposed the daimyo did owe him a debt. He had after all been responsible for ending the plot of a coup d'etat that had split the original guardians and eventually led to the internal conflict between members. But it had ultimately come down to a fight between the revolting guardians and those fighting to defend the order. Only 3 had survived of the original 12, and only one of those had been of the revolting guardians. He supposed if Tsunade's logic was right, the daimyo also owed a debt to Chiriku, who had been fighting by his side during the conflict. In your mind, Asuma replied slowly, but we all know that the daimyos work under their own rulebooks. They don't have the same codes we shinobi do. But even so, Tsunade argued, you saved his life. That surely earns you some favor, you cannot deny that. Why the sudden interest in the 12 guardians? Asuma asked, choosing to ignore Tsunade's statement, and instead ask a question that had been bugging him since the topic of the 12 guardian ninja had been brought up by the 2 Sannin. A look passed between Tsunade and Jiraiya, the latter giving a short nod to the Godame, giving her permission to continue. Something he found odd considering it was Tsunade, not Jiraiya, who was Hokage. She shouldn't be taking orders from anybody, even her fellow Sannin. The only people who were supposed to influence the Hokage were the elders, and an elder Jiraiya certainly wasn't. We wish to send a genin to train under them, Tsunade informed him. Asuma couldn't help but snort at Tsunade's announcement. Send a genin to train under the elite ninja guardians of the daimyo. You didn't simply place a genin among the elite 12, you only went if you were fortunate, or unfortunate, enough to receive an invitation. You can't just send a genin to train under the 12, Asuma chuckled. It's not some team you can mix and match until you get the best combination. It's an elite group of ninja hand-picked by the daimyo to protect him. You think for 1 minute he or any of the 12 will want a genin tagging along? They work as a team, they cannot have a weakness, and a genin would be a weakness no matter who it was. That may be, Tsunade argued, but there are circumstances that lead to him needing to be trained by the best. Then why are either of you training him? Asuma questioned. The 12 guardians are strong, but none of them were or are in the league of 2 Sannin. We can't, Tsunade answered quickly. Between my duties as Hokage and my need for Jiraiya to keep an eye on things outside of Konoha, we can't train him. Even if the 2 of us didn't have duties to attend, we would only be able to train him so much. I don't understand? Asuma asked. What could the guardians teach this unknown genin that 2 of the legendary Sannin couldn't? The guardians specialize in specific areas of ninjutsu, Tsunade informed him. They specialize in the use of elemental jutsu. Asuma could see where she was going with this. The 12 guardians all specialized in one of the elemental forms of chakra. The daimyo had wanted 2 shinobi who were exceptionally skilled in one of the elements to minimize the threat of any attempts on his life. By having 2 shinobi who were masters of each individual elements, he had the counter to most ninjutsu. Smart on the daimyo's part, and if the combination was right, the teamwork between the 12 was almost unparalleled. The original 12 were a testament to that. I see, Asuma told Tsunade, so this genin is to be trained in his elemental affinity? Not quite. Tsunade answered again, sending a side look to her old teammate, who had rather strangely stayed quiet so far during this meeting. The look seemed to have sparked some life into Jiraiya, who took over from where Tsunade had left off. What I'm about to tell you does not leave this room, Jiraiya told him with an authoritative tone in his voice. Asuma nodded as if it was a giving. This is an S-class secret. S-class? This must be something of utter importance. A sense of pride swelled in the pit of Asuma's stomach at being included in something of such secrecy. Uzumaki Naruto has awakened a dojutsu, Jiraiya announced. Asuma frowned. As far as he knew, Uzumaki wasn't a name that inherited a bloodline, and he definitely wasn't from either the Hyuga or Uchiha families. He awakened the Rinnegan during our trip to find Tsunade. Asuma frowned. He'd never heard of the Rinnegan. He wasn't even aware Konoha had another Kekkai Genkai by the name of the Rinnegan, let alone it being a dojutsu. And this involves me how? Asuma questioned. He failed to see how anything relating to Uzumaki had anything to do with him. It wasn't like he was Naruto's sensei. If anything, shouldn't it be Kakashi here instead of him? The Rinnegan allows the holder to use all forms of jutsu, Jiraiya informed him. There are no restrictions on what the user can learn. He was beginning to see why Jiraiya and Tsunade had informed him instead of Kakashi. Whilst Kakashi undoubtedly had thousands of jutsu at his disposal, he had only mastered 2 elemental forms and could only use a third sparsely. If they sent Naruto to the Guardians, he would be getting trained by the 10 best elemental users in the shinobi world. I see, Asuma told Jiraiya with a nod, but I'm afraid it doesn't make any difference. The 12 simply wouldn't accept training a genin. Like I said, it's invite only. This is where you come in, Asuma, Jiraiya replied. We want you to take Naruto. Take him to the location of the fire temple. And risk both of our deaths? Asuma asked incredulously. I'm lucky I am still alive. You think they'll just let 2 people wander into their temple, and then just leave again? That temple is sacred, it's their home and where they train. It holds secrets not even I am stupid enough to talk about. You simply don't walk out of it alive, their secrets are too great. You could not persuade the daimyo to let you train? Jiraiya asked. He owes you a life debt, even a daimyo cannot argue with that. You want me to waste a debt of this magnitude on getting a genin some additional training? Asuma questioned with an edge. I do not view it as a waste, Jiraiya replied. Naruto is a shinobi of Konoha with a weapon in his arsenal which could greatly help Konoha in the future. You have other reasons for sending him away? Asuma questioned, not liking the way that Jiraiya had spoken about Konoha's future. To him it sounded like the Toad Sannin expected something bad to happen. His training is imperative, Jiraiya told Asuma with a sigh, for both his own safety and for Konoha's. For Konoha's safety? Asuma repeated, looking at Jiraiya skeptically. In the years I have been tracking Orochimaru, I have heard of an organization that began to be associated with his name. They were rumored to be made up of missing nins from various nations. Who their leader is or who the other shinobi are I don't know. But when Naruto and I were about to leave to find Tsunade, Uchiha Itachi and Kisame of the 7 Swordsmen arrived looking for Naruto. There is only one reason they would be searching for Naruto. His dojutsu? Asuma asked. No, he hadn't awoken it at this time. The only other reason anybody would search for Naruto is the Kyuubi. Jiraiya replied sadly. It didn't make sense to Asuma. Why would anybody be looking for the Kyuubi? Everyone over the age of 13 knew that the Kyuubi was sealed by the most gifted seal master Konoha had ever produced. Nobody, maybe not even Jiraiya, could undo the Yondame's seals. Was there any point in searching for the boy who contained it? So you're sending him away to avoid these missing nins finding him and to stop them from infiltrating Konoha anymore? Asuma deduced. He had to admit it did make sense. If they were seriously searching for Naruto, it wouldn't take them long to come back to Konoha to find the boy, but if he was away, with only a few people knowing his location. It's one of the reasons the 12 Guardian Ninja is so appealing, Tsunade piped up. Nobody knows the location of the fire temple. Akatsuki would not be able to find him, and it'd allow Naruto a chance to train, for him to prepare for them. It made sense, but then, making sense didn't mean that people would agree with it. Whilst Asuma did agree that if this group of missing nins were searching for Naruto, it was for the best to get him out of Konoha, and getting him to a place such as the fire temple was a good idea. But none of this changed the fact that the daimyo would unlikely allow Naruto to be trained by the 12. Asuma was about to reply to the 2 Sannin when the door to the Hokage office flung open, revealing the form of Uzumaki Naruto. It appeared Shikamura had succeeded in getting the young boy, though he appeared to be still in his pajamas. His feet were bare and dirty from no doubt running through Konoha. His hair was even more unruly than normal, and his face still covered by that white mask he had been wearing since he returned with Tsunade. Sasuke! Naruto yelled, his breathing short and shallow as he burst into the office, his finger pointing accusingly at Tsunade. Where the hell is Sasuke? Asuma saw Tsunade visibly wilt much like a dying flower would at the mention of the Uchiha's name. He knew why, of course. The last Uchiha had left Konohagakure no Sato. All the Jonin had been used last night to try and locate the intruders that had arrived in Konoha, but nobody had been able to find them. It was only later in the early hours of the morning that they discovered, while searching the Uchiha compound at the house which had previously held the young Uchiha, an uneaten meal sitting cold on his table, a half-drunken glass of water beside it. Clothes packed quickly, and the entire house looked like a small tornado had hit it. Uchiha Sasuke, Tsunade told the boy, has defected from the village. What? Naruto screamed. No way, there's no way Sasuke would do that. Kakashi trailed the scents of the 4 intruders to the Uchiha compound and then to the borders of the fire country. Sasuke's was with them, Tsunade told Naruto. Asuma watched the boy's head hang. It was impossible to know what the boy was thinking, his mask not only masking his face but the emotion he was no doubt feeling. Something that unnerved Asuma. He hated not being able to see people's faces. You could tell so much from seeing the expressions. He could have been forced, Naruto asked hopefully, his voice full of desperation. You said there were 4 of them. Not even Sasuke could overpower 4 shinobi. No, Tsunade informed Naruto, a look of utmost regret on her face. He left willingly, he even packed supplies. Then I'll go and get him back. Naruto growled with fierce determination in his voice and a pump of his fist. I'll bring him back even if I have to break his legs and drag him back. You're wasting your time, Jiraiya stated simply from his position against the wall. Sasuke left because he wanted to. Even if you did manage to bring him back, he'd just leave again at the first chance your back is turned. You're wrong, Naruto exclaimed, turning his attention to the Sannin. Oh, am I? Jiraiya asked. What would you have done if you caught up with him? Pleaded with him until you're blue in the face? Begged him on your knees? He chose to leave. Nothing you could do would convince him not to go to Orochimaru's side, trust me, I know. But we can't leave him with Orochimaru, Naruto exclaimed. You must stop thinking about him as if he were your friend, Jiraiya told Naruto. He is my friend, Naruto yelled and stamped his foot childishly. No, he isn't, Jiraiya countered, not letting the kid's anger affect him in the slightest. If he were, he would never have fought you, tried to kill you. If he was your friend, he would never have left with whichever shinobi Orochimaru sent to collect him. You don't know that, Naruto said quietly, almost weakly, like he was struggling to believe it himself. I do, Jiraiya answered. You need to forget him fast. You have more important things to do than worry about Orochimaru and the Uchiha. Then I'll train so hard I can defeat Orochimaru and get Sasuke back and defeat anybody who attacks my precious people. This exclamation brought a snort from Jiraiya and a look of skepticism. You think you'll get strong enough to beat Orochimaru under Kakashi? You can barely match Sasuke now. What makes you think you could beat a Sannin? I can't, Naruto stammered in an oddly hesitant moment from the boy who always seemed so self-assured. But I will. I'll train myself if I have to. If Kakashi won't train me seriously, I'll train myself until I can protect all my precious people and Konoha. I'll be its greatest protector. And just how do you plan on managing that? Jiraiya asked. With my help. Asuma hadn't known why he had said it. There was just something about listening to the boy proclaim he'd protect Konoha so passionately that it had reminded him of his own father's iron will to protect Konoha, an iron will that had led to his death. Perhaps this boy was worth calling in that debt from the daimyo. Perhaps this boy could protect Konoha. He'd have to get the ball rolling. If he was going to train Naruto, he wanted to do it properly. He didn't want to be marred into the same group as Kakashi. By the time he was finished with him, Uzumaki Naruto would not be a shinobi to mess with. Not Orochimaru, not Akatsuki, not anybody. He'd show the faith in the boy his father always had. Uzumaki Naruto would live up to his father's legacy. They had been traveling for nearly 4 hours and already Sarutobi Asuma was beginning to regret agreeing to the Godame's plan to train the troublesome Uzumaki Naruto. Ever since they had left Konohagakure no Sato, the blonde had done nothing but pester him to teach him new techniques, and Asuma was already beginning to miss the passiveness of his own Team 10. It was now safe to say that Asuma could see what Kakashi had been saying all these months. The boy had an unfaultable thirst for ninjutsu, something that would bode well if the boy was allowed to train under the 12. He couldn't say he had been particularly keen to take the mission when Tsunade and Jiraiya had first mentioned it. In fact, he had come damn close to rejecting it, but there was something about this boy that had made him want to help. When he had first returned from the 12 Guardians, he could not understand his father's attachment to the boy, but now he was beginning to see why. The boy was nothing but infectious. There was just something about the boy that screamed that fate had bigger plans for him than to simply be an ordinary shinobi, if one could be ordinary with the Kyuubi no Yoko sealed inside you. If he ever needed proof that Naruto was destined for things that few in Konoha could begin to comprehend, it was the unveiling of the Rinnegan. Asuma had never seen anything like it. When Naruto had taken his ANBU-style mask off in the Hokage's office, he had been awed into silence. Of course he had heard of it, but had always dismissed it as nothing more than a myth. But to see it in all its glory just meters in front of him had been inspiring. The mythical words that followed the legend of the Rinnegan echoed through his mind as he stared into the metallic silver of Naruto's eyes, the Savoir or Destroyer. He could now understand why Jiraiya and Tsunade were so keen for him to get the best training available to him, why they had pushed so hard for it to be him to adopt the role that any shinobi in Konoha would have thought Hatake Kakashi would have taken. Hatake Kakashi had always been a strange one, as far as Asuma could remember, right back to their academy days. He'd always been a loner and a stickler to the rules, something which hadn't made him especially popular with the boys within their academy class. Of course the girls didn't care and were utterly besotted by the aloof Kakashi, which again didn't help him win over the boys in their class. Asuma had watched Kakashi rise through the ranks of Konoha's shinobi and had worked with him on numerous occasions, and there was no doubt he was a great shinobi. It was as a person that Hatake Kakashi was lacking. The masked man sometimes made decisions that mystified the other jounin, and often made him question whether his father was wise in letting the copycat ninja become a sensei. As far as Asuma could remember, Kakashi's decision-making had always been a little off right back to when he was a kid. Everybody from their class had heard about Uchiha Obito's death, and it was plain to see to all that it affected him greatly still did now if the amount of time he spent at the monument was anything to go by. This was part of the reason why Asuma had been so reluctant to take Naruto on this training trip. The thought of leaving his own genin team with Kakashi didn't sit well with him. He had seen how Team 7 had acted toward each other. After all, that was one of the reasons he was traipsing over the fire country with an energetic blonde, and he wasn't keen to have his team taught by a man who had allowed his own to fall into such chaos. Though he knew he couldn't exactly blame Kakashi for all of Team 7's faults, the copycat ninja could only work with what he was given, and once again the Konoha graduation system had failed. Whilst it was tradition to place the highest scoring graduate with the lowest, sometimes it simply didn't work out, and Team 7 was one of those times. His father had gotten the dynamics of Team 7 wrong, and whilst it was only one team, the past had proven that a team in the mold of Team 7 was liable to either kill each other or get killed. He just hoped that perhaps Kakashi proved himself to be a capable teacher and would look after his team as he looked after his fellow Jonin's pupil. At least he had Kurenai to keep an eye on things if everything went pear-shaped, and out of everybody in Konoha, Kurenai was the one he knew he could rely upon the most. It had broken his heart when he had to tell the red-eyed women that he would be leaving indefinitely on a mission that he couldn't tell her about. He had seen the confusion and hurt in her eyes, and he could only pray that she understood, and, as selfish as this may seem, hope that she didn't find somebody else during his time away. During all his years, Sarutobi Asuma had never met a woman like Yuhi Kurenai. It made him sad to say most kunoichi followed the path that Mitarashi Anko did, and whilst he was sure many shinobi in Konoha lusted over the snake mistress, that type of fervor wasn't appealing to him. No, Kurenai was gentle, kind but assertive enough to put him in his place when she didn't agree with him, which happened a lot. It was this nature that made Kurenai such a good Jonin sensei. He'd seen how she was with the young Hyuga. It was almost sisterly the way that Kurenai looked out for the exceptionally shy little girl. Team 8 was an interesting one from what Asuma had gathered. Each member part of one of Konoha's most prominent clans, and each member having a trait which made them have the potential to be an excellent tracking unit. Between the Hyuga Byakugan, the Inuzuka's dogs, and the Aburame's insects, it made for one very gifted tracking team. Though he hadn't said anything to Kurenai, he had learned quickly not to criticize her team. He still had a sore back from sleeping on the couch. To him it seemed that Team 8 lacked a significant ninjutsu user. He liked to think, though perhaps he was a little bit biased, Team 10 was the perfect mix. They had Shikamaru to immobilize their enemies, Ino to find out information, and Choji was the heavy hitter. The perfect team. Whoa! Asuma was broken out of his musings at Naruto's sudden exclamation. The masked boy had come to a stop a few meters in front of him, at the top of the steep hill that they had been scaling for the past half an hour, and had he not known exactly where they were, he would have been more than a little worried at the sudden stop by his new apprentice. When Asuma reached Naruto's side, he could see why the blonde had stopped. The familiar sight of the daimyo's rather extravagant estate came into view at the valley's bottom. The daimyo's estate was like a small hidden village, a large perimeter wall having been built around a building that could only be described as a castle, putting even the Hokage mansion to shame. There were a few other buildings scattered within the boundary that they could see from their position, no doubt for servants and other employers of the fire daimyo. To the far side of the estate a small forest sat hiding, if Asuma recalled the 12 Guardian Ninjas temple. Is this it? Naruto asked excitedly, turning to look at Asuma, who was once again greeted by the horrible white mask that was quickly becoming hated. Yup, Asuma replied, casting the estate another glance. This will hopefully be your home for the foreseeable future. Whoop! Naruto gave an enthusiastic punch to the air. Asuma gave a smile. At least the boy was enthusiastic. He needed if he could convince the daimyo to allow him to train with his elite guard. Come on, Naruto, let's go, Asuma told the boy, walking slowly down the gravelly path of the valley that he knew from personal experience would lead down to the entrance into the daimyo's estate. Both Konoha shinobi wandered down the path without sharing a word. Naruto was no doubt excited and wanting to get down for training, if the constant jabbering that he had had to endure on the trip down was anything to go by. Asuma himself couldn't deny that he was looking forward to being able to put his skills against the best. He'd like to think he could still match the new guardians, but somehow he had a feeling he was in for a shock. Perhaps this training mission wouldn't just be beneficial for Naruto. Well, a familiar voice called out, a voice that Asuma hadn't expected to hear ever again. Look what the cat dragged in. Asuma couldn't believe his eyes. Stood in front of the gate that permitted entry to the daimyo's court was a single figure, the silhouette of his shadow scaling the large white bricked wall. Long time no see, Chiriku, Asuma replied to his old friend. Chiriku allowed a smile to grace his face. His bushy black eyebrows remained the only hair on his head, though his face was now marred with more age lines than the last time Asuma had seen him. His clothes were a lot better than the last time they had been in each other's company. Chiriku's robe wasn't torn and dirty as it had been during the last time they had met. Now it was immaculate, and almost uniform-like. "What brings you here of all places, old friend?" Chiriku asked, coming away from his post to shake Asuma's hand, giving the bearded man a clap on the back as he did so. "I must say you're looking much better than the last time I saw you." Asuma had to smile at that. The last time he had saw Chiriku he wasn't exactly looking healthy. In fact, if he remembered rightly, it was Chiriku who said he looked like he had contracted the plague. He couldn't blame him, of course. Personal hygiene hadn't exactly been top of his list of priorities back in those days. "What the love of a good woman will do to you," Asuma replied with a grin, seeing Naruto shoot him a glance. "Settled down, huh?" Chiriku asked with a grin. Thinking about it, Asuma replied with a steady nod. "So what are you doing here, Chiriku? I never expected to run into you here." "The same could be said about you," Chiriku replied. "Thought you'd gone back to ordinary life? What happened? Get bored?" Asuma took a moment to think of the best way to tell his old friend enough to satisfy his curiosity, but without giving away the mission. The appearance of Chiriku was unexpected and slightly troublesome. Having one of the 3 surviving original guardians did add a little bit more interest to this mission. "I am here to see the daimyo," Asuma informed his old comrade. "The Godame Hokage wishes for a special genin of Konoha to train under the elite." A frown appeared on Chiriku's face, causing his forehead to crease and his impossibly bushy eyebrows to slant diagonally. "You should know that nobody trains with the 12, his old friend said, "and the daimyo will not take well with the Godame Hokage thinking that she can force him to allow it." Asuma winced a little. He had said the exact same thing. Perhaps it would change his old friend's opinion if he were to show him what laid underneath the mask Naruto wore, but he had been under strict instructions by both Sannin to keep Naruto's Kekkai Genkai a secret unless absolutely vital. "I assure you, old friend, it is of utmost importance that I see the daimyo." Asuma could see that Chiriku wasn't relenting, not that he should have expected him to. Chiriku had always been a very stubborn ninja who was not easily convinced. "You know I would not ask you, Chiriku, if it was not important. For old time's sakes?" "I can get you into to see him, Asuma," Chiriku answered with a sigh, "but I can't promise he'll agree with your demands." "That's all I ask?" Asuma replied with a nod, and Chiriku gave an annoyed tut before turning toward the gate and allowing his chakra to flare around the latch, causing it to swing open with a click, allowing them access into the courtyard. The courtyard was massively different to how Asuma remembered. Last time he'd been here it had been a wreck, big craters missing from the ground where various jutsu had struck, and if he remembered rightly, a small portion of the castle that the grounds were designed around had been burning. Now, though it was like that epic battle which had killed 9 of his comrades had never happened, the craters were filled in and made to be part of this beautiful garden. Perhaps the pond that sat at the bottom on the grounds was the only remnant of the battle. Tall hedges now made an unofficial fence around the garden. A few statues littered the courtyard, and an apple tree sat in the center with a few stone benches under it. "Bit different, huh?" Chiriku said to Asuma, who could only nod as he, Naruto by his side, followed his old friend up the elaborate stone stairs and up to the large, polished wooden door. Chiriku wasted no time in opening it and allowing them all entrance inside. The inside of the house was exactly how Asuma had imagined it to be. Paintings adorned the walls of people, who he assumed were the daimyo's family. There was an impressive chandelier hanging from the ceiling. A large staircase sat just meters to the side of them, which disappeared up to the next floor. "If you'll just wait here, please, whilst I go and alert the daimyo to your presence," Chiriku informed them before wandering off to the door which sat underneath the large staircase, leaving the 2 Konoha shinobi on their own. It didn't take long once Chiriku had disappeared for Naruto to slowly begin to edge away from him, no doubt intending on having a look around this castle. Thankfully, he had seen enough of the boy to anticipate this, and grabbed hold of the back of the boy's orange jumpsuit. "Where do you think you're going?" Asuma asked. The boy turned around and Asuma imagined he was looking sheepish underneath the mask. "I just wanted to look around," the boy offered meekly with no real conviction behind his words. "This is the daimyo's home, Naruto," Asuma told the boy, trying to implore to him how important a place this was. "You must be on your best behavior if this is going to work." Naruto sighed and seemed to begrudgingly nod in understanding, taking his place by his side with his head slightly hung. "I'll speak to the daimyo first," Asuma informed Naruto, thinking it best that he spoke to the man first. Having Naruto meet the daimyo could be well disastrous. "You stay out here and don't move." "Naruto Tuteji's Asuma-sensei, have some faith. I'm not going to do anything. This is the daimyo's home." It would be a lot more convincing and comforting for Asuma had he not seen Naruto constantly call his father, the Sandaime Hokage of Konoha, old man. If Naruto could disrespect one of, if not, the strongest ninja in the village on a regular basis, then he could very well be capable of insulting the daimyo. And that wouldn't be good for them or Konoha. They waited in silence for a couple of minutes. Asuma looking at the various pictures which donned the walls. They were quite interesting and some were obviously very old. During his time as a guardian, he had never once in all the 6 years stepped foot in this palace. The door beneath the staircase creaked open and the bald head of Chiriku poked out. He gave Asuma the barest of nods, and the bearded man quickly left the young boy standing just meters into the palace as he strode across the entrance hall and towards the small door where Chiriku had poked his head from. "Do me a favor, Chiriku," Asuma whispered as he walked past his old colleague and into the daimyo's office. "Keep an eye on him. He's a bit boisterous." Chiriku nodded and allowed Asuma entry to the office whilst stepping out of the door frame himself. Asuma could only assume he had moved closer to Naruto to keep an eye on him. "It's been a long time, Sarutobi Asuma." The old, croak-like voice that Asuma knew to belong to the daimyo of the Fire Country. The daimyo was an elderly man